Good evening, council staff, guests and those watching online. Welcome to our council meeting. The City of Swan disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Where an application for an approval, a licence or the like is considered or determined during this meeting, the City warns that neither the applicant nor any other person or body should rely upon that discussion or determination until written notice of either an approval, the conditions which relate to it, or the refusal of that application has been issued by the City. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the Council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time and public statement time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful of the Council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. In conditions of entry, no electronic, visual or audio recording or transmitting device or instrument is permitted to be used. A person who breaches this provision of the City of Swan Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019 will be required to immediately leave the premises. I have attendance apologies, leave of absence. I have nil. Mr CEO, at this point in time.
Mr Mayor, we have nil recorded.
Okay. I have no apologies other than Councillor Podolnik is running a few minutes late. Councillor Lucas is with us online. He is unwell after heart surgery but has joined us. Declarations of financial and proximity, interest and interest affecting impartiality. Mr CEO, are there any others than those listed?
Mr Mayor, there's no others recorded.
Any other declarations, either councillors or staff? Thank you. Public question time. Questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations of 1996. Questions and answers marked with an asterisk have been amended either for the purpose of summarising, e.g. removing preambles and statements, etc., or editing. 5.1 is questions to answers which were taken on notice. Questions taken on notice at the ordinary council meeting held on the 16th of January from Miss Barbara Dundas and Mr Bob Baku are included in the agenda. 5.2 questions relating to reports on the agenda, questions which due notice has been given. I have nil. 5.2.2 questions without notice. Any questions in the gallery relating to items on the agenda? I have none registered at this point. None. Other questions? 5.3.1 questions for which due notice has been given. We have a number of questions from Mr Jeff Blinko, and those answered have been supplied. Is Mr Blinko with us? No. Also questions from Miss Kerry Blinko, and with the exception of 1 through 4, which have been taken on notice, the others are answered. Also questions from Mr Bob Baku, and all the answers to those questions are in the agenda. Questions from Miss Karen Mowat. Likewise, those questions are answered. Questions from Mr Harry Gratt. They are answers. Mr Gratt with us? No. Also questions, 5.3.2 is questions without due notice. We have a number of questions there from Dr Peter Langlands. Dr Langlands, you've got those answers?
Mr Mayor, can I clarify a couple of...
Okay, well, I've got questions in the gallery relating to items on the agenda, none listed. So you have further questions relating to those?
I'd just like, if there's any more elaboration on the first question, what response was received from these letters sent to state and federal government?
If I recall, there was nothing more than an acknowledgement that they've received, and that was about it.
Okay.
Yep.
And how does the city's advocacy's priorities list work?
Sorry,
The city's advocacy priorities list, how does that work?
the list is constructed by council and then put together on an advocacy list, and we go from there.
Okay, so when you have meetings with, government stakeholders, these priority items are then brought up. Is that the
Yeah,
idea?
if council's endorsed the advocacy list, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And then regarding question 2, can I ask why did the city not take up the offer from the climate experts to be briefed? Is there any specific reason?
Personally, don't recall receiving an official offer from them, but don't take my word for it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
can't answer them. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions?
Mayor, could I just ask that Dr. Langlands puts that in writing if he wants that to be officially considered?
Well, he can if he wishes. Now, also got some questions from Miss Jackie Barros. Can you come to the microphone, Miss Barros?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. These questions are relating to the St Jude's development. First question, the large existing trees along the East Street exit track.
Right. Ms Barros, if it's on that, Councillor Johnson has to leave the room.
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ms Barros.
Sorry. The large existing trees along the East Street exit track are due to be removed on Thursday. Why isn't the council enforcing condition 4 of St Jude's DA, which requires a battle axe leg to incorporate both the jacaranda and the large existing trees?
Take it on notice. You got any further questions?
Yes. At the December 16 meeting, a petition was handed in with 564 signatures requesting council reconsider St Jude's expansion. When will the community receive a response to this petition?
Again, I'll take that on notice.
And my last one, at the December 16 meeting, another petition with 241 signatures was handed in requesting St Jude's not be allowed to construct parking bays under the sugar gums on the verge of Fauntleroy Park. When will the community receive a response to this petition?
Again, I'll take that question on notice.
Okay,
thank you. Now, Mr Gratt, I just noticed you just arrived. We actually went through your questions. You've seen those answers to your questions? Yes, no? Okay, I think there's a copy over there. Okay. That's right. Is there any further, Mr Gratt, on those questions before we move on? Okay. Takes us now to public statement time, and I have a number registered. The first public statement is 6.1 from Mr Charles Potter regarding the need for climate change action. Mr Potter. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I'm here, as you may know, to give my support to the recently proposed notion of this council reaching net zero emissions by 2030. There are so many reasons why this change is absolutely necessary for the continuation and function of not only this council but the rest of the world. Climate change is the most devastating and important and difficult issue humans have ever been unlucky enough to face. Me and all other young people have been born into the middle of the world's most difficult, frustrating and utterly deadly problem. It is beyond time for proper action on the climate catastrophe to start occurring, and there should be no question of this council doing what is right. I'm so sick of all these problems being created and sustained by the generations before me for short-term self-interest and unsustainable, continual economic gain. These next 10 years we have left to act have never been matched in importance by any other time period on Earth. These next 10 years are the years where we earn our place on the planet. These next 10 years are not a time for procrastination, for idle action, for fooling around debating whether the issue exists or not. We need action. We need it as soon as possible. You can help save the world with a simple vote and dedication. I know some of you will be thinking that I don't know what these words and phrases mean, that I am just a child repeating what has been said to me by extremist left-wing parents and teachers, that I don't understand the way the world works, that I'm a believer in conspiracies. Well, let me tell you this. I am not stupid. I am not ignorant. I'm not repeating random words and phrases that I've heard. I'm scared. I'm scared about what is happening to our planet, scared about what will happen to the innocent and unsuspecting life we share our planet with. If you believe that caring deeply for other living beings is extremist, foolish, a conspiracy, then I'm afraid that you need to seriously consider your own actions. Time is running out. We must act now. And all of you, with influence and power over an area containing people, wildlife...
Thank you, Mr Porter. That's your 2 minutes. Thank you. You'll see our standing orders don't allow extension for public statement time. Thank you, Mr Porter. 6.2 is Ms Pam Royden on the same subject. Thank you, Ms Royden.
I'm at the opposite end of the age demographic to Charles. I'm not going to be around in 2050. I don't even have children or grandchildren whose future I fear. However, I am concerned about the impact of climate change. I'm a scientist and I have spent considerable time researching the data, and I am a lover of our unique nature from the oceans to the forests. The need for action is urgent, and we can take action. It's not too difficult and we've nothing to lose. The City of Swan can play its part. Other local governments and businesses have done just this. I'd like to see the City of Swan find out what its carbon footprint is and see how we can reduce it. This will encourage residents to look at their own footprints, and it will send a message to the state and federal governments that we take climate change seriously. It will make economic sense and it makes moral sense. Some of you may remember BP pick-a-box star Barry Jones, who later became a politician. Barry wrote a book last year called What Is to Be Done, and I finish with a quote from it. We will have no economy if we have no environment. Environment is more pressing. Let us fight on that front first.
Thank you, Mr Royden. Our next speaker is on item 6.3, is Ms Jackie Berros, regarding item 4.6, which is the replacement of the northern boundary fence and retaining wall for St Jude's. Ms Berros, and just Councillor Johnson is leaving the chamber. Thank you, Ms Berros. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, councillors and Mayor. Good evening. I'm an affected neighbour living next door to St Jude's. The northern retaining wall works need to be considered in relation to all other outstanding aspects of the build. In the last few weeks, St Jude's team has approached me with 4 different designs, all inconsistent with what was approved in the development application. The latest plans were issued late last Friday and they show significant changes to the high-level care facility. Critical information is missing which is needed to understand this new proposal. Demolition works a few metres from my bedroom are now in full swing, yet at the 11th hour, neighbours are still in the dark about what is being proposed. How can I have any confidence that if these plans are approved by Council, they won't be changed yet again under delegated authority? There are many unanswered questions about the new plans. There are also many unanswered questions about the changes that were approved under delegated authority in December last year. Numerous conditions contained in the original DA are not being followed. For example, the retention of mature trees. Why is the City allowing the developer to do this? The architect has told us we cannot share the plans that show works affecting our own properties with any external party. How can neighbours possibly understand what is being proposed if we are unable to seek our own independent advice? The northern retaining wall application should not be approved until all outstanding issues are resolved. This includes full consultation on the new plans that indicate changes to the building design. A pause is needed on this application so that all parties can be clear about what is proposed to prevent unnecessary extra stress and disruption to the surrounding family homes and to protect the well-being of St Jude's vulnerable residents. Please reject this application and take time to consider this development as a whole. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms Berros. The next speaker is number 6.4, which is Mr Ben Doyle from Planning Solutions in regard to the same item. Thank you, Mr Doyle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillors. Ben Doyle from Planning Solutions. In relation to item 4.6. Councillors, from reviewing the notes of the agenda forum and listening to the the statement just now, it appears councillors are being asked to use this application as a tool to stymie the development that has already been approved by Council on 2 occasions. Councillors, you'd be well aware that such course of action would contravene your obligations as a councillor and would contravene the Local Government Act and would expose the city and councillors to penalties.
Mayor, are we being threatened here? Is this what's going on?
No,
Mr Doyle's allowed to read what he believes. Yes, to that. Sorry.
Consistent with the obligation to determine the application on its merits, the Office of Recommendations for approval. This is a very simple matter. It is a retaining wall to the railway reserve and the fence above, the public art component of which has already been approved by the city. There is nothing controversial or problematic about this application. It is simply a retaining wall to shore up the land to achieve the levels that have already been approved by Council. On that basis, I'd ask that you approve it in line with the Officer recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Doyle. The next speaker is 6.6, Ms Mina Rabadia. Can we just recall Councillor Johnson? Yeah. Just one moment, Ms Rabadia.
Good evening, Mr
Just
Mayor
one moment.
and councillors.
We've just got to get Councillor Johnson back.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Meena and I am a resident of Brabham in City of Swan. I make this public statement as a community member of Brabham in the City of Swan. I want to acknowledge the hard work and efforts of our Mayor, Kevin Bailey, during the recent bushfires. In addition to the bushfires, we were also dealing with the COVID lockdown, and this took a huge toll on all our homes, work, social and school lives. Not only was it draining physically and emotionally, but for many financially. This made during emergencies or in the worst situations, community resilience shines through. And I'm so proud of the Ellenbrook and surrounding communities for the strength, camaraderie, love, support, and kindness. The bushfires were so scary and confronting for everyone in our community, including my family that evacuated like many others did. The thick smoke and the ash that surrounded our home was truly frightening. There were so many messages circulating on Facebook that it was hard to know what was the actual situation. During this time, Kevin, our City of Swan Mayor, and the PS Ward councillors, Kate and Patty, were at the front line assessing community needs, checking in with people that evacuated to local car parks, and worked alongside businesses and community to keep everyone informed, which I shared with the community members in the community through a group we created where we had over 300 people added in a couple of hours through social media. Sourcing donations of water, food, and other resources to keep those in need supported and comforted. I would like to thank SKLPC and Amin of Subway Alton as well for these generous donations on a very short notice. Kevin was consistently updating us all on the social media, radio, and TV, and this brought us a sense of calm because of his leadership and presence. He was frontline.
I have to be consistent. That's your 2 minutes. Thank you for your comments,
Thank
and we pass it
you.
on to all of the city staff that supported us. Thank you. Next speaker is 6.7, Mr. Lauren Pratt.
Good evening, councillors, CEO, Mayor, and all present tonight in the council chambers. My name's Lauren Pratt, and I'm a resident of Gidget Gannup. I'm going to read my notes because what I've been through is a little raw, and even though I'm a preacher, I've needed to read my notes to keep my emotions in check tonight. You see, I lost part of my property during the recent bushfires. I was fortunate not to lose the freezers that I use for Midland meals. I use those freezers to store the meals in, and I feed the people, or a part of Midland Meals that feeds people in both Ellenbrook and Midland each night. At the moment I don't have power, but I'm using generators to ensure the meals don't spoil, and we can continue providing the free service that we do to those in need. As you can imagine, the trauma of the horrific and devastating bushfires has impacted on a lot of people's lives, like me. Families, and as well as communities, have been impacted by this trauma. I'm grateful for the support and leadership provided by the City of Swan Mayor, Councillor Kevin Bailey. Our Mayor is a true example of a leader who provided a sense of calm to us all. He rang me on my way out and said, "Hey, are you out, mate?" And I remember almost crying, thankful that someone had rung me. And I said, "Yes, I'm out in the car park, catching my breath before I work out what to do next." He has an extensive network of people that he calls on to help out, and nothing's been too hard for him. I don't believe I've ever seen a mayor so active and who contributes at times endlessly by rolling up his sleeves and getting right in beside the firefighters on the grassroots level.
Okay, Mr. Pratt, I have to be fair to
He
everybody.
fronted the media when things seemed out of control, the social media, and provided regular and real updates
Lauren,
as he was in the thick of things.
Lauren, I do have to call your time at 2 minutes. So,
Pardon?
yeah.
2 minutes?
Yeah, no, you've had 2 minutes, Lauren. You're only allowed 2 minutes.
So I've got to crank it up?
No.
Finished?
No, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren, for your words.
Mr Mayor, can I propose that we suspend meeting procedures, Local Law 2.4, Section 3. A public statement is not to exceed 2 minutes. I think we're allowed to do that on this occasion. So I'd like to move that motion.
To do what?
To abolish it so we can, to suspend that meeting procedure, Local Law, so we can continue to hear from Mr Pratt if he wants to continue, but he's gone.
We better see how far he's bolted, but I think he's heading outside to do some work, isn't he? Yeah. I think he's gone. Okay. Oh.
So can I move my motion then, Mr Mayor, to suspend the meeting procedures, Local Law?
Those in
Get
favour.
a second bat.
Do you really want Mr Pratt to have a second bat? Well, being the modest person I am, it's a little bit tough to sit there and listen to Mr Pratt, but if you want to hear from him... No? Yeah, well, obviously I'm going to move it. Someone had a seconder over here. Yeah, okay. No one against that, I guess? Okay. We'll give you how long at him? Another 2 minutes? 2 more minutes, Lauren, if you need that long. If you need that long, I know you can talk forever.
Guys, last time I was here, I had one hearing aid. Now I've got none. I lost them in the getting out of the fire in some way, so I've got to replace those. Kevin showed up every day, even times when his own property was at risk. Kevin, you're a man of incredible strength and stamina, and I really admire that in you, and I know the people in the community do as well. I want to thank you for everything you've done for Midland Meals. Over Christmas, for Midland Meals, he came down with glazed hams, which I know he had done himself. Also, at this time, I want to thank Councillor Rod Henderson, Councillor Paddy Jones and Kate McCullough, who really supported us over that time as well. Your generosity and willingness of all of you enabled us to feed up to 100 people a day over that period. The City of Swan is fortunate to have such an inspirational leader as our Mayor. He's hardworking and he truly cares for the people. Many times he slapped me on the back and just said, "Hey, how you going?" And that's all I needed to get through. Kevin, your leadership was evident to us all during a time of COVID lockdown and the bushfire emergency. We commend you for your leadership, humanity and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Pratt. Moved and seconded. Anyone against? Thanks for carried. Item 6.8 is a motion, an announcement from Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a public apology to make, and I'll speak nice and clearly. A complaint was made to the Local Government Standards Panel in which it was alleged that I contravened the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007 WA when I shared and supported a Facebook post which contained derogatory comments regarding some fellow councillors. The panel found that I breached Regulation 7(1)B of the said regulations 3 times as my conduct was in breach of the City's Code of Conduct and deserving of a penalty. And further, my conduct was intended to disparage and embarrass Councillors Johnson, Kiley and Catalano and was therefore likely to cause detriment to them. I accept that I should have not engaged in the relevant conduct, and I now apologise to Councillor Johnson, Councillor Kiley and Councillor Catalano and my other fellow councillors and the public.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. We now move to part 7, which is petitions. This point open petition 7.1, 24 signatures requesting urgent repairs to footpaths in High Point Boulevard, Allenbrook, and replanting different trees instead of London flame trees at the top of High Point Boulevard. They tend to die, and each year they're a waste of money from ratepayers to the City of Swan. Are there any other petitions? No? A motion that... Well, we've already received that one, I guess. Motion that be received. Thank you. A seconded. Moved Councillor Parry, second Councillor Jones. Anyone against? Declare it received. Announcements by presiding member. That will be myself. Councillors, before we commence tonight's meeting, I would like to take a moment to mention the Wirraloo Gidgegunnup bushfire and that devastated the community week before last. Firstly, let me acknowledge more than 800 firefighters, emergency service personnel, volunteers and City of Swan and Shire of Mundaring staff who worked around the clock to help protect lives, homes and livelihoods and to provide comfort to those who were evacuated to our evacuation centres. Having witnessed some of the work firsthand, I am both humbled and grateful for the unwavering support and service you provided to our community. Unfortunately, despite this hard work, some homes and livelihoods were lost as part of that fire. To those individuals, families and businesses directly and indirectly affected by the bushfires, I wish to pass on my condolences. We are now very much in the recovery phase, and I can assure you that the City of Swan is actively involved in supporting those affected by the bushfire to access financial, physical, emotional support required. I encourage anyone who has been affected by the fires to contact the City of Swan or visit the City's website for the latest recovery information. I'd also like to take this moment to acknowledge the amazing support we have received from within the state, nationally and internationally, from messages on social media to donations of animal food through federal government funding and even a mention at the American Super Bowl. This support, regardless how large or small, helps lift the spirits and reduce stress and anxiety. Of course, not to be outdone, while the fire was burning, we were also in the middle of a full COVID lockdown. Therefore, I wish also to thank those in the City of Swan who are not affected by the bushfires for doing their part to support the state government's move to protect the state from another COVID outbreak. Staying home, wearing a mask and adhering to the requests for testing pay dividends to both our health and our safety. Thank you. I'd also like to send our congratulations to our CEO, who became a grandfather for the second time on the weekend with the birth of a baby daughter. Congratulations, Mr. CEO. We now move to 10.1, questions for which notice were taken on notice. I have nil. 10.2, questions for which due notice was given. There are a number of questions, with the exception of question 2 from Councillor Johnson, which is taken on notice, requires some more research and information. Those answers have been given. Councillor Johnson, you have those questions and answers.
Thank you.
Thank you. 10.3, questions for which due notice has not been given. There are 2 questions for Councillor Johnson there, and those questions and answers have been answered. Receive those, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've got a follow-on question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, my question is about the answer to question 2. It says that the $56,815 payment to Gartner, and Gartner, I believe, is a IT consultant, so advises consulting firms. It says it's a part payment. What would the full cost be for an annual subscription?
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe that's a 6-month payment, and we have a 3-year subscription.
Thank you. So that's a fairly typical amount to be paying a consulting firm for expert advice. $56,000. Is that right? It's a reasonable amount of money to be paying for expert consulting services.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, for a leading research and advisory IT service, the City believes that that is value.
No, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from councillors? Okay, no. Leave of absence, Mr. CEO.
Have none recorded, Mr. Mayor.
None. No request for leave of absence. Move on. Confirmation of minutes. A resolution required to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 20 January 2021 and the special council meeting on the 5th of February 21 with those amendments as listed. Turn over mover. Moved Councillor McCulloch. Seconded Councillor Parry. Anyone against? We'll declare those carried. Okay, now we move to Part B. Items I have withdrawn, councillors, are 2.1, 4.3. Councillor Scanlon has advised she no longer wishes to withdraw 4.4, 4.3, 4.6, 4.11, 5.1, 5.2 and 6.5. Therefore, I wish to move a motion that those items are not withdrawn be moved, both in Part B and the confidential. Moved Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor McCulloch. Is anyone against? We declare that carried. We now move to the first item, which is item 2.1, Policy Review, Legal Representation, Cost Contribution, and a motion from Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor, Councillors. Just before I commence, just to note that I'm a candidate for the state election coming up and that I've advised the CEO and Mayor as such.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
Now, Councillors, the policy has been changed in a number of areas for clarity, but I just, if I may, Mr Mayor, before I move, if I could just ask staff if there's any matters that have changed other than for clarity.
Ms Albright.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. The changes proposed by Councillor Henderson do not substantially change the policy. They provide additional clarity. They remove some duplication. There is one change where if the Chief Executive Officer is seeking assistance, legal representation, then that is to be approved by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor rather than one of the Executive Directors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Carry on, Councillor Henderson.
So, Councillors, I move that, one, we adopt policy C044, access to legal services for elected members and employees subject to the changes provided in the updated attachment, which I will table, which is here, for inclusion in the minutes. And 2, record the reason for the changes offer's recommendation is to provide further clarity regarding some of the provisions of the policy. These amendments do not substantially change the policy.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Parry. Is anyone against?
Just a question, Mayor, if I could.
Question, Councillor Colley.
Under the previous policy, have any councillors made use of the previous policy to claim legal costs?
Ms Albright.
Through you, Mr Mayor. That question is quite similar to the question asked by Councillor Johnson, which I've taken on notice because I'd like to do some research, but it is not many councillors that have had reimbursement under the policy.
But there have been, apparently.
There have been at least 2 that I'm aware of, but I need to check our records more thoroughly.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone against? No one against. Declare that carried. Now move to 4.3, the proposed Brabham Local Development Plan number 3, lot 9102 Woolcott Avenue, Brabham, and motion from Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, my motion is that the Council resolve to 1, approve the Brabham Local Development Plan number 3 for lot 9102 Woolcott Avenue, Brabham, subject to 1, the construction of 10 parking bays, 6 being immediately to the south on Fuselage Road and 4 being adjacent to the public open space as shown on the submitted plan, in addition to those previously approved. And number 2, submissions of a hardscape plan, and I think I've made a change to that. It's the actual wording will be up on the screen. Thank you to Councillor Lucas for making this recommendation to change the motion. Number 2 is submissions of a hardscape plan showing subground service locations to the satisfaction of the CEO, providing space for future planting of at least 7 shade trees on the footpath area immediately abutting lot 9102 on Fuselage Road and Throttle Street. 2, advise the applicant owner of the resolution of council. 3, record the reason for changing the officer's recommendation. 1, to provide necessary on-street parking, and 2, to provide hardscape spaces for tree planting to occur when the development is completed.
Thank you, Councillor Kiley. A seconder. Seconded Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Okay, carried. Move to item 4.5, which is proposed clubhouse access driveway on site of former Caversham Racing Circuit at lot 802 West Swan Road, West Swan, and a motion from Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I move that the Council resolve to 1, recommend to the West Australian Planning Commission that the application for the proposed club rooms and workshop for the Vintage Sports Car Club of Western Australia Incorporated at lot 802 West Swan Road, West Swan, be refused for the following reasons. 1, the proposed use is not consistent with the purpose of the land's reservation for parks and recreation under the Metropolitan Regional Scheme 2, the proposed use is not consistent with the purpose of the lands designated as a bush forever site, and the physical works proposed have the potential to adversely impact vegetation. 3, the proposed use will adversely impact the quiet amenity of the adjoining acclaimed Swan Valley Tourist Park and the abutting residences to the north. And 4, the application has not demonstrated that access to the site of the West Swan Road can be safely accommodated.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zeno, the seconder, and Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against? Declare it carried. Now I move to item 4.6, the replacement of the northern boundary fence and retaining wall at St Jude's Aged Care Facility at Lot 6, number 26, Lot 51, number 28, Lot 350, number 30, Swan Street East, and Lot 22, number 53, East Street, Guildford. Councillor Johnson is leaving the room. Councillor, remind you that the item is here in regards to a northern boundary fence and retaining wall. Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Okay, motion for Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, my motion is that the Council resolve to 1, grant approval for the proposed amendment to DA 414-19 Aged Care Facility, replacement of northern boundary fence and retaining wall on Lot 6, Lot 151 and Lot 350 Swan Street East and Lot 22 East Street, Guildford, subject to 1, a suitable method of excavation, stabilisation and construction of the full length of the northern and eastern boundary retaining wall and fence being approved to the satisfaction of the CEO. 2, advise the owner applicant of the resolution of Council. And 3, record the reasons for changing the officer's recommendation as being 1, so that the works can be completed at one time, 2, with minimal disruption to the adjoining neighbours, and 3, there is a clear understanding by all parties that the process involved and time frame involved is in completing the necessary work.
Seconder? Second, Councillor Scanlon. You just second it.
I was questioning. I have a question for staff.
Okay, you second it or you're asking a question?
Can I do both?
Yeah, of course you can. So you are second and you have a question for staff. Okay. Who's your question to?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question through you is to the Governance Officer, and I'd just like Ms Albright to comment on the statement made by Planning Solutions around the legal requirements of Council regarding this motion.
Ms Albright.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm sorry, I'd have to take that question on notice. I'd need to get the details of what Mr Doyle's statement was.
So may I follow up with that with another question? Are Council able to make a decision tonight on item 4.6? Are we legally able to make a decision on item 4.6?
Well, yes, we are.
Okay.
We are. But I'll remind you, Councillor, that the item before us is for the replacement of the northern boundary fence and retaining wall.
Yep.
And that's what we should be making a decision on. And I think what Mr Doyle was intimating at was that we have to address the item before us and not things that aren't within the item.
Lovely,
so
thank you.
I have a mover in a seconder. Is there anyone against? No one against. We'll declare it carried. Sorry, Councillor Lucas. You wish I forgot you were hiding in the telephone. Okay. No, look, under the circumstance, I do need to give Councillor Lewison. He's way off site. Do you wish to...
Mayor, other times you've not been willing to go back on that. You've declared it carried, in my view.
Well,
and
in this circumstance, we're operating with someone who's not on site, so we need to be a little bit lenient, like I would be with anybody else. Sorry, Councillor? You don't wish to debate it?
A short time delay, I did say I was against and I had to raise my voice.
Yeah, there is a delay. So we're working in eccentric circumstances. So Councillor Lucas, you wish to debate it?
I'll debate it, yes.
Okay. Councillor Kiley, open the debate.
Councillors, I don't want to waste a lot of time on this. This is a simple proposal which makes a lot of sense for the affected neighbours that and the applicant and the staff, so that we're all clear, or all on the one page in how we go forward with this this retaining wall, the excavations that are being undertaken. There is concerns from a number of adjoining properties that this excavation will cause damage to the adjoining fences. There's dust, there's removal of asbestos that's been undertaken. There's a whole lot of things there to occur. We've heard from affected neighbours last week that they'd like to have a clear understanding of what's going forward. This is really quite a simple proposal that we grant approval for this. I'm not trying to stop this happening. We're just saying let's go ahead and actually do it. I can advise you that after a meeting with Mr. Russell, Mr. van der Linde and the CEO today, this afternoon, it seems that there is a plan in place for this to occur. It's just a matter of the applicant putting in the application for a clear plan, a clear road ahead for this work to be undertaken, and that everybody can be satisfied that as long as the CEO, this motion allows for the CEO to be satisfied on what that path ahead is. It's not going to be up to councillors. It's not going to be up to myself or any other ward councillors to step in. It will be up to the CEO. If there's a clear path ahead of how this excavation, stabilisation and construction of the retaining wall and fence goes up, then we can all move ahead with it. So I don't see the problem with this, but I do have a problem with piecemeal approaches to developments where they come in and put an excavator through one section of the block and then maybe leave it sit there for a while with possibly the ground, they dig in against the neighbour's property and the rain comes through. We maybe have a small flood event which then affects the stabilisation of the walls that they've excavated out. Let's just get it done in one hit. Let's just give the neighbours certainty about how this is going to proceed. And it's as simple as that. So I ask for your support there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scanlon is the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, just a couple of things to add to the comments that I support of Councillor Kiley. So throughout this development, there have been quite a few changes, and the residents adjoining the property to be developed have had different plans brought to them, and plans which excavate onto their land, plans which dig up their sewer, plans which remove their vegetation, and they just want certainty. This motion by Councillor Kiley is giving them certainty that the CEO is overseeing the development to ensure their boundary walls are not affected, to ensure their land is not excavated upon if they do not agree for it to happen. So this is about just a little bit further oversight. I think this is the direction with this particular development Council should take on behalf of the adjoining neighbours of St Jude's. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, and I hope you all can hear me.
Yep.
I've read this item a number of times, and the reason I'm opposing it, councillors, is that this application is the replacement of the northern boundary fence and retaining wall. The only no objection, because this is the boundary fence that faces the existing railway line, and both the PTA and the SHO have had no objection to the proposed boundary fence being replaced with the retaining wall. Unfortunately, in my view, Councillor Kiley's motion is now linking, which I believe is against good planning policy, linking this application to a previously approved application by the same proponent to the eastern wall. And we should only be dealing with this application on its merits, which is the northern boundary wall. And I believe we'll be failing what they call the Newbury test of being reasonable, as there is no nexus between the northern wall facing the PTA rail line and the eastern wall, which has already received approval. So that's my reason for objection, because I believe with lunatic facts, and I think this is all a comment that we're actually going back and trying to undermine a previous approval of council, and that's why I can't support Council Cox's motion. I hope you heard that well.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Any other speakers for the motion? Any other speakers against the motion? Question, Councillor Congerton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, Mr Mayor, to one of the staff, the relationship of a suitable method to look at the stabilisation of the eastern boundary when it's already been approved. Sorry, my question wasn't to you, Councillor. Mr Mayor?
Sorry, Councillor Congerton.
Councillor kindly wanted to answer my question. So, through you, Mr Mayor.
Yes.
To one of the members of the staff associated with this, the suitable method of excavation stabilisation in respect to the eastern boundary. If the eastern boundary wall has already been approved, then the requirement to reassess the eastern boundary wall is based on what?
Mr Russell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, yes, I completely concur with the proposition that Councillor Congerton has made and that the Deputy Mayor has elicited. From a planning point of view, the 2019, December the 11th, 2019 Council decision approved a retaining wall at the eastern boundary. Now, the fact that another piece of legislation in the Building Act has other requirements that have come to light with respect to the notion of constructing a boundary wall at that boundary that might require the extension into the neighbour's property is a separate matter under the Building Act. But for our Planning and Development Act, which this decision is being made pursuant to, that satisfactory arrangement in terms of the incorporation of a boundary wall at the eastern boundary is already subject of a standing decision. So the nature of the motion already encompasses something which has already been done, self-evident, not to the satisfaction of the Chief Executive Officer, to the obvious satisfaction of the Council and its approval.
Thank you, Mr Russell. Councillor Congerton, any further question? Okay, thank you. I'll go back to any speakers against the motion. Any other speakers for?
I have a question through you, Mr Mayor.
Dominic.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, to Phil Russell.
Mr Russell.
Just so that I'm hearing you correctly, are you saying that the Planning and Development Act, the Building Act, should be ignored in this instance? Is that what you're saying?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, I'll be clear. It is not a case of ignoring it. They are two separate acts that stand independent and both have obliging requirements on the local government. As you know, building permits are never presented to the council. So what we've said all along here is that no, it's not a question. We can't ignore the Building Act, but they can't get a building permit, as I understand it, for this retaining wall that was originally approved from a planning point of view because of the necessary incursion into the neighbour's property. To do so, they require a separate form which requires the consent of those neighbours. And as was alluded to last week in the forum, if the neighbours don't provide that consent, then the applicant, St Jude, must go to a magistrate's court to obtain a magistrate's order to allow that incursion. So it's not a case here of the Planning and Development Act ignoring the Building Act. They operate separate. But this is a decision under the Planning and Development Act, not under the Building Act. If that makes sense, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Russell. Any further? Yes, Councillor
If you wouldn't
Carolina.
mind, thank you. The application under the Building Act, that's to go onto the property to build the wall, and that doesn't come to council at all. Where does that go to?
Mr Russell.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and I'm careful not to speak out of turn here. As you would well know, I'm a planner, qualified, not a building surveyor. But I'm confident enough to say this, that in order for it to be processed by a local government acting under the Building Act, the requisite form giving the consent of the owners must be supplied. Without that, there's no legal basis for our building staff to issue that, and that therefore requires the St Jude's in this instance to go to a magistrate's court. So it's not a process that comes to the council here. You've never seen, as we would well know, councillors, Mr Mayor, we've never produced building permits for this council to approve or disapprove. So this is tied up with all of that. And then if the neighbours don't give St Jude's the consent form, then the only recourse that St Jude's has is to go to the Magistrates Court and obtain an order from the magistrate, which I am informed by my colleague, the Principal Building Surveyor.
This is not related to the motion at all.
No,
it's just not related to the motion I'm putting forward.
Mr Russell's answered the question that Councillor Catalan asked, and he's explaining it. So are there any other speakers, councillors? Further question?
I've actually got a question then. So the thing is that if the consent isn't given and it's held up and it's got to go to court for the building permit to be given, because the consent hasn't been given by these particular owners on this other development application, then when this one goes through, or if it does go through for the northern boundary, then what will happen is that there'll be a lot of excavations there that could potentially undermine the shared boundaries of these two while they're waiting for these approvals to go through the court. You see what I mean? It's like, is this a tactic to actually force these owners to give their consent to the proponent going onto their property for this other development application that's already been approved in 2019?
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, you'll recall I spoke at length on this and answered virtually the same question last week. And what I said to the council, Mr Mayor, was, in my opinion, permitting this application and allowing St Jude's to begin excavation is not going to, in my opinion, undermine the capacity of the neighbours to refuse to assent to the intrusion onto their land, and whether or not, if works proceed here, that somehow goes against those neighbours in a magistrate's court. That is a matter of legal opinion, and none of us here are qualified, in my understanding, to venture an opinion on that. What I will say here, and reiterating what I said last week, there are developments afoot, Mr Mayor, that some councillors might be more apprised of than others. St Jude's have realised the conundrum they are in not securing the consent of Miss Barros or Miss Lewis to an incursion on their land. And St Jude's, having realised that, understand that they must make alternate arrangements, which they have already proposed to city staff here. And Mr Mayor, we have said to them, that is a modification to the planning approval that you need to submit. And they will not get a building permit for such works because we will be saying it is not compliant with the planning approval. So they will need to bring to the table a modification. So I looking at the nature of the situation and the constraints that St Jude's face, I don't for a second, as I said, Mr Mayor, last week, hold any fears that the council approving the northern boundary wall is going to somehow conflate to a scenario where the residents, who I greatly sympathise with, will be forced into some form of consent against their will to the nature of the development on the eastern boundary, not when St Jude's have already come up with an alternate solution that they're prepared to do as far as we know, that they just are trying to navigate as to what the process is. So I don't for a second subscribe to the notion that this will prejudice the position of the residents to the eastern boundary in the course of proceedings.
Thank you, Mr Russell. Right, I'll ask again, any further speakers? Councillor Coley, your right of reply. Thank you.
Councillors, I ask you to listen again, to grant approval for the proposed amendment. To grant approval for it. I'm not trying to stop anything. It's correct. Councillor Lucas said it's previously approved. That's correct. 11th of December 2019, we approved this works to be undertaken. all this motion is doing is ensuring that the excavation, the stabilisation and construction method is approved by the CEO. I can't wait to wash my hands of it. I'll hand it over to the CEO, which is effectively handing it over to Mr Russell and Mr Van der Linde, as you know, to make the decision on this. It's not going to be my decision. I'm not trying to hold anything up. I'm just giving the neighbours certainty as to the process involved in what's going to go forward. Previously approved, Councillor Lucas is somehow trying to stop this. I'm not stopping that. It is approved and I accept that. Mr Russell's words, self-evident. I don't know what this means, but he somehow interrupting a satisfactory arrangement, something to that effect anyway. It's not a satisfactory arrangement with the neighbours. The neighbours aren't happy about this so-called... There is no arrangement. They haven't come to an arrangement. But what I have heard, and Mr Russell is fully aware of this, and Mr Van der Linde and the CEO is fully aware, is that the applicant has found a way to possibly build this retaining wall and do the works without affecting the neighbour's property. But the arrangements before, or the proposed arrangement, was that they would inject mortar, we heard, into the neighbour's property. Now, if you inject...
Councillor Coley, this is your right to reply, so you're responding to Councillor Lucas's debate.
Which I'm doing, Mayor. You've given Councillor Lucas plenty of leeway here, so I expect that you give that back to me. Thank you.
Being called to order. You're now starting to talk about mortar being injected. That was never, ever mentioned prior to this.
The method of construction relates to the mortar being injected into the neighbour's property, and that's what was being proposed. Now, if that's to the satisfaction of... It doesn't satisfy the neighbours...
I've called you to order. You are
explosive mortar under pressure...
If you keep going,
explosive mortar under pressure being blown into the neighbour's property.
Councillor Coley, I'm sanctioning you for the rest of this motion, and I'm now going to put it in a vote. You've overstepped the line once too. I've warned you more than enough.
You give other councillors leeway when it suits them, Mayor, but you don't give it to me, and I'm a bit annoyed. I'm sick of it, actually.
I'm now putting
sick
the
of
vote.
it.
Those in favour? Those in favour are Councillor Scanlon, Councillor Brodovnik, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Kiley, Councillor Catalano, and Councillor Richardson. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Am I correct? Councillor Lucas, you're against. Therefore, the motion fails. Now I need a motion for the staff recommendation.
I move that motion.
Moved Councillor Lucas. Seconder. Councillor Congleton. Is there anyone against? Okay, we used to debate it.
No, thank you.
In that case, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? So that's Councillor Lucas, Councillor Zanino, myself, Councillor Parry, Congleton, McNamara, Jones, McCulloch and Henderson. The rest are against. Staff recommendation is carried. Now we move to item 4.11, the Bradman Residential Density Investment... Oh, yeah, get Councillor Johnson if you're good. Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to 1. Note the findings of the Bradman Residential Density Investigation contained in this report. 2. Request the CEO to write to the Minister of Education requesting the acceleration of the construction of a second primary school and a high school within Bradman. 3. Request the CEO to write to the Minister of Planning demonstrating our disappointment in the current planning policies regarding the public open space provisions given the high density development proposals within the urban growth corridor, and request the Department of Planning review its current open space provisions within the Planning Act. 4. Request the CEO to write to the Minister of Communities and the Minister of Youth requesting a significant and long-term investment within the City of Swan urban growth corridor for youth and family services. 5. Record the reason for changing the officer's recommendation is due to the additional housing density. Bradman will require additional significant investment to ensure that the community receives their much-needed services to further development of their local community.
Seconder, Councillor Kiley. Is there anyone against? Carried. Now move to item 5.1, the City of Swan Waste Plan. Proposed motion from Councillor Kiley.
Councillors, my motion is that the City that the Council resolve to 1, endorse the City's waste plan for submission to the Department of Water and Environmental Regulations subject to adding the following wording to the additional comments under section 6.4 to include: the City of Swan has established a waste advisory group with community representation that provides input into Council's waste management planning. And 2, record the reason for changing the officer recommendation is to recognise the input of the City's waste advisory group.
Seconder, Councillor Congdon. Is anyone against? Amendment, Councillor Jones. I think Councillor Jones wants to add the word community before waste. Yeah. Just moving the word backwards.
Respectfully, I won't accept it because it is actually called the Waste Advisory Group, and it does have community representation. So there's a slight difference there, Paddy, but thank you anyway. Staff.
Okay, go councillors. It's not a free-for-all here. All right. Okay. Now we're moving a second. There was no one against. We'll declare that carried. Now move to item 5.2, the intersection modification of New Bond Street and Morrison Road. Motion for Councillor Prodovnik.
Okay, so defer considering the motion of the intersection of New Bond Street and Morrison Road to a future meeting of Council to enable A, traffic modelling to be undertaken for the proposed intersection that identifies potential impacts on the area between Lloyd Street and Great Northern Highway, particularly Hammersley, North and Margaret Streets. B, Council to be briefed on the Midland Oval Redevelopment Master Plan, or the MORM, in April before endorsing this intersection modification. C, Council to informally review the impact of significant developments that have occurred in Midland since the MORM was ratified in 2018 at that briefing in April to ensure good planning outcomes. Record the reasons for changing the officer's recommendation as 1, to allow staff time to undertake traffic modelling at this intersection. 2, the road structure supporting the MORM has changed with the relocation of the train station away from Crale Street to Helena Street, and a briefing on the impact of this development and other significant developments in Midland will enable Council to review its strategic objectives for the MORM. 3, the MORM has not been reviewed by Council since it was adopted in April 2018. The onus is on Council to frequently review key strategic documents, including the Strategic Community Plan, the Corporate Business Plan, and the budget to ensure we remain on track to deliver the best outcomes for our community.
Seconder, Councillor Scanlon. Is there anyone against? Question, Councillor Henderson.
Probably of Mr. Coton. I'm sure we've done road traffic modelling in the past, probably a few years back. And have we done recent traffic volumes accounts to be able to extrapolate from current readings to what the previous modelling was?
The most recent traffic counts in New Bond Street were 2017, and I would suggest that they probably wouldn't have changed much in that time. One of the issues with doing traffic counts right at the moment is that the traffic patterns are a little bit unusual with COVID and people working from home, etc. So the traffic volumes that if we did traffic counts right now, they might not be representative of the true value, but I would suggest on New Bond Street they wouldn't have changed that much.
Question, Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's through you to Mr. Coton also. I'd like to ask Mr. Coton when traffic counts were last completed on the other streets mentioned in this motion, so Lloyd Street, Hammersley, Margaret.
Mr. Coton.
North.
I don't have that information to hand, unfortunately. There was a number of traffic counts were done in 2017, so Hammersley was done in 2017, New Bond was done in 2017, North Street in 2017. I'm not sure about Lloyd Street and the other ones in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go back to, is there anyone against? There is. Wish to debate it? Wish to debate it? In that case, put the vote. Those in favour? No one wants to debate. No one put their hand up. So I move the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Kiley, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Podovnik, Councillor Scanlon, Councillor Richardson. The rest are against. Motion fails. I need a mover for the officer's recommendation. Right, sorry, you're doing the other page. Yep, okay. Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you for that.
Oh, happy to catch you out any time. So, my motion reads that Council resolve to defer the proposal to modify the intersection of New Bond Street and Morrison Road until consultation letters have been sent out to residents not already consulted in the area of Morrison Road bounded by Great Northern Highway, John Street and Lloyd Street, including residents on George Street, Hammersley Street, Margaret Street, residents on North Street, Charles Street, George Street, east of Sayer Street, and record the reason for changing the officer recommendation is that the partial closure of New Bond Street will likely result in more traffic on Hammersley Street and other streets where consultation letters have not been sent.
Seconder? Councillor Catalano. Is anyone against? Councillor Parry, you wish to debate it?
Yeah, I wish to debate it, Mr Mayor. I'm against.
Councillor Johnson, we know you're not. But soon to do that,
Yes, that I am.
Councillor Scanlon, I'll ask you to open the debate.
Thank
Or should
you,
I let
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson go first, maybe?
He's
I can't do
following
that,
the
Councillor
standing
Scanlon. Carry on.
orders. We're not allowed to debate unless
know.
someone
Carry on.
opposing our motion wants us to.
Carry on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I spoke to some people around Margaret Street in my old hood, and I said, we're going to be modifying this intersection. How do you feel? Because I know when I lived on Margaret Street, this was a frequent route that I followed, because Sayer Street has a left in, left out now. If you're coming back from Midland Gate down Sayer Street, if you want to get into this area, that entire section, which Rochelle asked for the modelling on, you have to turn left on Morrison Road and then either right onto New Bond, or you have to go up to the intersection of Morrison Road and Great Northern Highway. We, as a community in that area, tend to go down New Bond because otherwise it takes a lot longer. So it's not a huge amount of traffic going down New Bond, as Mr Coton mentioned, but it makes a big difference to those residents. So these residents were quite upset that they weren't consulted about this. I know that New Bond Street may look like a little insignificant street to most, but it's one that people use to get home. It is one that they need to have a comment on. So all I would like to ask you all is to direct the city to consult with the community that will be affected by this road modification. They've asked to be consulted. We've all received emails regarding this. They just want to have their voice. There's already a lot of traffic concerns on Margaret Street. One lady told me her 3 cats hit by cars in the space of a few weeks. 3 cats hit by cars. It's because people speed down Margaret Street. They cut through Margaret Street from Great Northern Highway to get to Midland TAFE. It is used as a rat run. When I first got on council, one of the things I did was ask Mr Coton if we could do some traffic studies on Margaret Street, because the traffic flying through there is really quite dangerous. This will increase pressure on Margaret Street, on Sayer Street, on Hammersley, particularly Hammersley Street, and the residents need to have a voice. Now, the modification of the intersection at New Bond Street has come to council in relation to the Midland Oval redevelopment plan, and that is something that community have always said they have not been consulted enough on. So the reason that I brought this motion, the reason Councillor Podovnik brought her motion to council, is because it matters to the community. They want to be heard. Please support this motion. It's just for consultation of a few streets, and it means that people will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. Councillor Catalano is the seconder.
Yes, thank you. What concerns me about this modification of the intersection there at New Bond Street is that the main reason for the restriction into New Bond Street and that part of Midland, the northern part of Midland, which has been there for, nearly, probably maybe even more than 120 years, is that there's no other way to solve the problem. Now, the thing is that the Midland Oval redevelopment plan, or let's just call it Midland Oval Precinct, is only in its early days. And already there's no alternatives other than the rest of Midland, that's been there for 120 years, just has to put up with restrictions and traffic basically being siphoned off what is effectively the throughway, Morrison Road, onto residential streets, Hammersley Street, North Street, George Street, Charles Street, Margaret Street, all residential streets with stop signs and what have you. So it's because there's no other way to deal with this issue emanating from this Midland Oval precinct, the development. And we've only just started. Now, what concerns me is, I just want to say also, the Midland Oval precinct, it's part of this whole idea of the Midland Activity Centre structure master plan, which is to bring an activity centre into Midland. And that's informed by the state planning policy 4.2. And that policy actually says that the activity centre is not to negatively impact on the already context or the already established areas that, you know, it's going to be imposed on. But what's happened down in Bellevue? What's happened down in Clayton Street? Yeah, now Bellevue people can't get into Midland because of overdevelopment, because we haven't taken the time. Well, in fact, it wasn't the city at that point, and I think it's a lesson to us in the city, because this Midland Oval precinct is in fact, as is Morrison Road, is in fact under our jurisdiction. But it's a lesson that if you don't get your fundamentals right, and if you hurry on making these decisions, you're going to end up with chaos. And honestly, we've got one part of Midland that's pretty much ready to fall over, and I would hate to see another part, the northern part of Midland, fall over. We need to just hold back a bit, do some consultation, and perhaps have a look at how the traffic is going to be projected with this new activity centre and the high development of this new activity centre. What kind of impact is that going to have on Morrison Road? What kind of impact is that going to have on the roads around the Midland Oval precinct and, in fact, other roads in Midland? And what kind of impact is that high density going to have on the old 120-year-old part of North Midland? So, you know, that hasn't been done. A traffic count it's a time shot. It's a screenshot, I suppose, of the traffic now. We're not talking about the traffic now. I've had a look at the Cardno traffic plan that informs the Midland Activity Centre Structure Master Plan, 2011, based on Cale Street being the main drag into Midland, based on lights being put at the intersection of Great Eastern Highway and Victoria Street, which is never going to happen. Main roads have said it's never going to happen. The train station was supposed to be located at Cale Street. PTA said, don't count on it, and guess where it's going to be located? Down at Helena Street. So, in fact, your pedestrian drag into the Midland Oval precinct is going to be completely changed. So why, this is the other thing about the Midland Activity Centre structure plan, or the master plan as you want to call it, which informs this Midland Oval precinct, is that it's supposed to be pedestrianised. So why have we got a two-lane road basically going into Morrison Road from whatever it is, what was the road that was previously called the Avenue, that's just recently been constructed across the Oval? Why is that two-lane when we're looking at a pedestrian precinct? Meanwhile, the people in northern Midland that have been there for 120 years have to have their traffic restricted. Now, we've really got to be sensible now, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parry, Speaker against the motion.
Well, Mr Mayor, I think I'll go first.
Against it? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll hear from Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I know how much you enjoy hearing me speak in these meetings. Mr Mayor, I wasn't planning to speak to any alternate motions in this meeting, so I don't have a prepared speech for you. I'm opposing this motion for two reasons. One, I preferred Councillor Prodovnik's motion, which I thought was really covered the issue in a lot more detail. But more importantly, Mr Mayor, I wanted to hear it debated, because this is one of the most serious problems we're facing in Midland, and that is traffic modelling, the Midland Oval Redevelopment Master Plan, and the need for Council to have proper oversight of the activities around the Oval. Now, the second thing next thing I'm going to raise is this. It's an enormous puzzle to me why it would be that when you're asking Mr Mayor who is opposed to this and whether they want to debate it, I would really like Councillor Parry, when he speaks, to explain why he's opposed to this and why he thinks people should not speak to it. Now, the reason I'm asking that question, and I want to hear it in your speech.
Do you want to address the item? Because
I am, Mr Mayor. I'm asking him to frame his debate in terms of
well, you're assuming that
traffic
he's going
in
to
Midland.
debate, Councillor. So can I ask you to actually debate the item, because you're not. You're talking about everything else bar the item before us.
I want to hear about traffic modelling from him in Lloyd Street. I want to hear his views on traffic modelling in the Great Northern Highway.
Well, Councillor Johnson, with all your respect, with due respect, you can't tell him how to debate. He'll debate if he chooses to. So, will you please debate the item? I'll ask you to resume your seat.
No, Mr Mayor, I'm just pointing out that, as he's not a Midland Guildford Ward councillor, has never shown any interest in this before. Why is he stopping debate?
Well, again,
point of order, Mr Mayor. That's completely against the rights.
If you're not prepared to debate the item, I'll ask you to resume your seat.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further speakers, for or against?
For.
Okay. If you're speaking for the motion.
Okay, starting now. This proposal will have an impact on traffic on George Street, Charles Street, Margaret Street, North Street and Hammersley Street. When we make decisions about closing roads or changing road infrastructure, we need to be very, very clear about the consequences of our actions. When the city closed Old Great Northern Highway in 1993, the Old Town Centre went into rapid decline. The new Bunnings has caused a lot of traffic jams on Clayton Street, and Main Roads is now investigating the impact of closing Robinson Road in Bellevue for a new railcart manufacturing facility in Bellevue. And how traffic from these developments will flow throughout Midland is important to consider when we plan to build a road. Only 5 people responded to our public consultation, and I used to think that the number of people who responded to a survey was important. What I've now come to realise is not how many people respond, but actually what they say. When the road structure on Farrell Road in Midvale was put on the agenda to be changed in 2016, only one resident fronted up to alert council to the problems that would cause. His name was Craig. And unfortunately, council ignored those concerns and improved the design of a median strip on Farrell Road in response to the Movida Estate development. Approval was given for a long median strip to be built and no openings to allow residents to safely exit their properties onto Farrell Road. Now, obviously, the report to council presented the median strip as a good option, and obviously council acted in good faith here. But in reality, the concerns raised by Craig about the design of the median strip should have been considered. The situation got so bad in 2017, Craig lobbied for an independent safety audit. That audit confirmed the median strip was dangerous and needed to be changed. In 2018, the City of Swan fixed the problem, which included putting in openings in the median strip at a cost of $64,000. And my point is, Farrell Road did need an upgrade, but the concerns originally raised by residents were not listened to by Council in 2016, and I'm asking Council to please not make the same mistake here. Let's consult with the people who live on these roads listed in this motion. A number of changes to local roads and intersections will be made to accommodate the new train station. Some roads are going to be redesigned and traffic's going to be rerouted from the Helena Street level crossing to the proposed Carl Street level crossing. Because obviously redesigning roads to fit in the new Midland train station will have an impact on the Midland CBD, let's get some more information here. Because not properly considering the impact of roads and other road infrastructure can be a costly exercise for the city and make life harder for our residents, as the example of Farrell Road shows. Please support this motion.
Speaker against the motion. Speaker for the motion. You against the motion? Okay, you can speak.
Councillors, I I should rise to speak against this motion. I think this is an attempt to bring this to your attention. The issue is to do with Midland Oval and what's left. Well, I shouldn't be calling it Midland Oval anymore. There's no oval left if you go down there. I was down there on Sunday, on Valentine's Day. The plan was I met with a few councillors, but I had hoped to invite all councillors down there just to see what it is like. And Councillor Parry, that invite's still open to you at some stage. Maybe not on Valentine's Day, of course, because might be people will start talking. But this motion I can't support it because it doesn't fix the problem, and it's just an attempt to slow this down when it really needs a full reassessment of Midland Oval. I read in the paper today how I think it was Finbar and Cedar Woods and Mirvac were selling record numbers of properties, but we go down to Midland Oval and I don't even have to ask staff whether we've sold another lot, whether these groups have come in and wanting to build a big unit development, because they haven't. I'm pretty sure they haven't. They're not approaching the city. They're not wanting to come there because in reality there's nothing there for them to come to. There's no trees. There's no large park. There's no Hyde Park in North Perth. There's nothing there. Sure, the trees are planted, but the plan, in my view, needs to be revised. And I ask you to swallow your pride, realise that everything that's been done at this moment is done with good intention, and I accept that, with good intention, but we're all wanting development in the area. We're all wanting the high-rise or medium-density development in there to bring people into Midland. This needs to be reviewed. We're not getting the response we wanted. $50 million and counting of ratepayers' funds, but if you go down there, I feel embarrassed. I'm not saying we should feel embarrassed. I don't want to get another code of conduct. I feel embarrassed as a ratepayer because I drive past Stirling Square and pretty well every day of the weekend there's something happening. There's a festival, there's cars, there was a man taking kids on rides in his motorbike with the sidecar driving around. We had everybody who wants to run an event wants to run it in Guildford in Stirling Square because it's an open park with trees. But we haven't got that in Midland. We need to review what we're doing. That road through the middle of what was Midland Oval has to come out, in my view. It has to open up. We have to provide an attraction to bring developers into the area, to bring an attraction into Midland, a treed area like Stirling Square in Guildford where they want to come and do something. So I'm not going to support this little stopgap measure to try and hold this up. I'd like the ward councillors to work with the staff for the March meeting to come up with a review of Midland Oval itself, the whole proposal. We don't have to change everything. Much of what we've put in there can be retained and add to to that attraction that we're trying to keep. But it's time to look at how we can make it better. Unfortunately, by moving the officer's recommendation tonight to have this intersection done, it's more money spent. In my view, it's good money thrown after bad. So we need to. I encourage ward councillors, work with staff, come up with a motion next week, and next month, councillors in the intermediate period between now and the March meeting, go down to Midland Oval, sit there, have a look what's going on, particularly on the weekends, and you'll see what I'm seeing and a lot of people in the community are seeing. And not only am I seeing it, but if you look at the housing valuations done at our last rates review, Midland area has suffered through drops in housing prices. Now, we would have expected with the development at Midland Oval, we would have seen an increase in housing prices, but we haven't seen that. The actual response from the community is people are not wanting to live in Midland, people are selling up and they are prepared to sell their houses for less than they would like and going to other areas. We want to attract the Finbars, the Mirvacs, the Cedar Woods or whoever does the big developments into the area, but we need to change our direction. And I encourage you for the March meeting to look at a sensible motion which will allow that to happen. Without ruining everything, just allow some changes to happen, maybe to open up the park to be an attraction like we see in Stirling Square in Guildford. Thank you.
Any further speakers for or against? Councillor... Okay. Councillor Lucas, and then we've got some other speakers. So, Councillor Lucas, you're first.
I'm against those. Is there another speaker for?
No, you're ready to go.
Okay. I'll firstly touch on Councillor Catalano's debate. The traffic 120 years ago was non-existent, so you've got to compare current situation. This intersection and the proposed way of design is all about safety. So you haven't got that double intersection just offset from each other. Residents will still be able to see it turn safely into New Bond Street onto Morrison, and they'll be able to turn left onto Morrison off New Bond, but they won't be able to cut across the other lanes of traffic. This is about a safety issue, councillors, because of the number or the amount of traffic that Morrison Road is travelling. And I go back to when I was a younger person, and I lived on Broome Avenue in Embleton, and because of the amount of traffic then going out to Morley, the then City of Bayswater had to close down a number of streets and cul-de-sac them at the intersection of Beaufort Street, Edward Street, Beaufort Street and Garden Avenue. You could no longer access those roads whatsoever because it was too dangerous because of the number of traffic. So this is about a traffic issue. I can't agree with Councillor Kiley's debate, although he is going to vote against it. He spoke about everything about it, other than the intersection. He spoke about Sterling Park and the redevelopment, but hardly ever mentioned the item, which is a new modification to the intersection. So I support the officer's recommendation. I foreshadow it because it's about the safety of vehicles travelling, particularly along Morrison Road, and preventing them turning against contra traffic into New Bond Street. So I can't support the deferral because it's a safety issue, and I think we should support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Speaker for the motion? Any other speakers against the motion? Councillor McCulloch, you're first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think, Mr Mayor, at first I was a little bit confused about the first motion where a traffic modelling study needed or seemed to be very important, and now we're going to the request for community consultation. And if the traffic study was that important, why was it not incorporated, or both of them were mixed? Councillors, we're moving forward with a road on an approved structure plan. The intersection will be far safer than the existing one, and Councillor Lucas has explained that, so I'm not going into that. It matters to the community that this development progresses in a timely manner. We've had modelling, we have had traffic studies. Mr Coaten has made wise comment in regards to that. We've had varied debate, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I don't know at times where we're getting our information from. Are we actually weighing it up and assessing it against the relevant, the facts, the stats, the data and other? I think we're all too often cherry-picking the details that we maybe want people to hear, and we're glossing over hard facts and relevant information that our community deserves. Mr Mayor, I was actually...
Councillor McCulloch, just a moment. I think Councillor Johnson's going to try a point of order. Well, it's not a point of order, but...
Yeah, point of order, yeah. When Councillor McCulloch is referring to we, who exactly is she referring to? Because she's obviously not referring to herself. So is it someone...
the collective group, I would suggest that. There you go. Thank you.
But then it's implying that Council is not doing its job correctly, because it's implying we're not...
You're plucking at a long straw, Councillor Johnson. We've listened to a whole bit of your respective debate already. So, Councillor McCulloch, if you could continue your statement, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We also need to give our communities the respect that they deserve by giving them the bigger picture and all those puzzle pieces, and we've certainly listened to community on both sides. Mr Mayor, I've had a work colleague only 4 days ago come up to me to say how excited she was moving from Coongamaya down to a street that runs off the new Midland Oval redevelopment or New Junction. They've outgrown their house in Coongamaya, need a little bit more space, and have purchased a property. very enticing for them. And the fact, she stated, with the new junction development, was going to be there for her family to enjoy, and watching it develop was something that they were really excited about. She comes from a bit of an events background, and she had some incredible ideas for community activation and events in that space, not just necessarily Stirling Park.
Sorry, I have another point of
and
order.
Saw.
Sorry, Councillor McCulloch. I have another point of order. That being that the motion is not about Midland Oval, and that I should have raised
Well,
this when
Councillor
others
Scanlon, we've allowed Councillor Kiley to speak about it. Councillor Pat,
still.
we've allowed everybody else to have a crack at it.
Can we speak to the motion as it stands, please?
I'm not going to do it because I've allowed everybody else to speak about Midland Oval. So let's be fair, because it's connected. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr Mayor. So I wouldn't have spoken about this, but obviously other people have made comments, and so I will respond to those comments for our greater community. Anyway, I will finish up. So they had moved there. She's excited about and has the vision of what's happening there for some incredible community events. Also, they have looked at the plan in greater detail. They think it makes sense with what's going on. They had a look at what's before us tonight. Again, it makes sense. It's going to be safe, and it's going to be safe for their family too. Thank you.
Thank you. Further speaker for the motion? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. I'm sitting back listening to the debate, and I need to support this motion tonight. Coming from the Barossa and the Adelaide Hills in South Australia, watching particular towns, and being up at Northern York on the weekend, these towns were designed a long time ago in terms of having that arterial road through. We are adapting towns to fit us now, whereby retaining the history of these towns is to not overly change the streets around them, but to change where we put those developments. If you drive through any of those towns in the Barossa, in the Adelaide Hills, in Northam, in York, we have that main arterial road, and we are not chopping those particular historic places of interest to visitors up by building ovals in the middle with roads going through them, and adjusting people that have lived there in the town plan by having the roads that they've lived in those neighbourhoods. You can't just go and chop up parts of historic towns by adding in roads and closing roads to suit future developments. To retain that history in those areas, you must retain that town plan. If we have large amounts of traffic using these roads as a bypass, then we need to look at alternative methods of moving that traffic outwards. These towns need to be retained as tourist and or historic areas. Therefore, traffic limits to 60 kilometres an hour. It's not a safety issue in the back streets. We don't see this happening in the Barossa, the Adelaide Hills, in Northam and York. People adapt to driving in a tourist town. Thank you.
Councillor McNamara, you had your hand up to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't delay too long. With regard to what Councillor Catalano had said, look, I agree with most of what she said from the point of view of there are other parts of the city of, I was going to say the city of Midland, but the town of Midland that need looking after. What I am concerned, Mr Mayor, is that since the days of the charrette, which is over 20-odd years ago, right, there has been many excellent Midland Ward councillors who have agreed with this particular concept and who have changed it over a period of time because of community consultation. Went down the road of actually listening to the community, and those particular councillors looked after the community. What I am saying is that if this particular situation had not been objected to for so many years, we would now be looking after what Councillor Catalano is saying. This would be over and done with. It would be completed, and we would be looking after the rest of Midland. And that is what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Thank you, Councillor. I rise on this occasion to speak against the motion. I don't have the right, Councillor. I want to get it back to you, Councillors. We're talking about the construction of an intersection. Now, you want to talk about some traffic study? I went and sat over there on Monday morning for 55 minutes. During that time, 53 cars entered the intersection of Charles and New Bond Street. Of those, 32 cars had turned left off Great Northern Highway, travelled up Charles Street, turned right into New Bond Street and left into Morrison Road. So a large percent of that traffic is used as a rat run. Logic would tell you that they did that to avoid the traffic lights. And those cars coming home the other way will go down to the traffic lights, turn right, so they don't have to turn a right hand through double lane of traffic. And Councillor Lucas was probably the one councillor nailed on the head that's about a safety issue. Left in, left out of that intersection makes that intersection a lot safer than now than watching people trying to turn right across 4 lanes of traffic in peak hour. It has developed into an unsafe issue. That's what we're here to talk about, councillors, is an intersection upgrade. We've talked about a whole lot of other stuff other than intersection upgrade. So I can't support a deferral of this based on other than the upgrade of intersection to a safer standard than what it is now. And on that, I'll ask the mover to close the debate.
Thank you. I have to say I'm rather pleased to close this debate. My motion was quite simple. Based on community concern of residents in Midland, it was not about debating the Midland Oval. It was not about debating the councillors for the Oval project and against the Oval project. And I'm really disappointed that councillors here can't see that I am just looking at this motion and representing the residents of Midland and their concerns about this intersection. I'm not raising this motion to stop the Midland Oval development, and I'd just really like for everyone to be a little more open-minded when motions come to council regarding Midland. So I've got so many notes to address everyone's speeches, but it's a moot point. I don't want to go over all those points made because they're just not relevant. What is relevant is the intersection and the effect it will have on the residents. So it's been mentioned by the Mayor being an intersection upgrade, but it's a degrade. It's changing the intersection. It's not improving flow of traffic. It's going to make it more dangerous at the intersection of Morrison Road and Great Northern Highway. That intersection actually, I believe, needs upgrading. I'm actually a bit disappointed Councillor Predovnik's motion didn't get up because I think a study would be really good in that area, because that intersection, there's a lot more people coming down Great Northern Highway and it can be a bit chaotic. I'm sure a lot of the staff are aware of the intersection being so close to the admin centre, but pushing more traffic onto Hammersley and Margaret Street is going to be a great disappointment to those residents who I just wanted to represent tonight. They were surprised that the street is to be modified. They weren't expecting it, and neither was I. I wasn't in any plans I'd seen for the Oval development. And I just want us to consider that the community could have a say in this before we change the intersection. That's all. I'm not saying don't change the intersection. I'm saying consult with the community. Let the people have a voice.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. That's for 3 minutes. We'll now put the vote. Those in favour? I have Councillor Richardson, Catalano, Johnson, Predovnik and Scanlon in favour. The rest are against. The motion fails. Mover for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
Moved to Councillor Lucas, seconded Councillor McCulloch. Is there anyone against? There is. We just debate it all over again? No. Put the vote. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Myself.
This Councillor Lucas, Parry, Henderson, McCulloch, Jones, McNamara, Congleton, myself, Zanino. Councillor Colley, you haven't voted of anything yet, and you're against. Okay. The rest are against. The officer's recommendation is carried. Now move to item 6.5, the Wooroloo Bushfire Council Rates Concession, and first motion for Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I move one, to defer the item to the March Council meeting for the following reason. Council recognises the hardship being experienced by the community of Gidgegannup as a result of the Wooroloo fire, and Council expresses a desire to provide some financial relief. The deferral to March will allow city officers to gather more data on affected properties, or is it affected, and the extent of the relief. 2, record the reason for changing the office recommendation is that it's difficult at this stage to assess the full impact of the fires on the affected ratepayers, and this deferral will provide opportunity for a full assessment.
Seconder.
Question, Mayor.
Question, Councillor Cole.
Through you, do staff believe that we would get any more information in the coming month than we possibly would have now? That's more valuable information.
Mr. Van.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
thank you. Through you, from the inspections that's currently being done by our health inspectors, we expect that there could be, if there's more or less properties involved that's affected, it would not be a deviation of more than 10%. So it's relative. I think the figures that we've got at the moment is quite accurate, but there will be a few. There's, for instance, late this afternoon there were still 10 properties that we couldn't access. So the numbers will change very, very little.
Councillor Parry, you second the motion. Is anyone against?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Lucas.
And towards Ms. Lay, most probably, or if Mr. Vandal is doing the assessment, when is our next quarterly instalment invoice ready to go out? If one of the staff can tell me, please.
Ms. Lay.
Through Mr. Mayor, the 4th instalment due date is mid-March, and the notices have gone out, but we pulled out the Gidgegannup properties that we knew were on the initial DFES list, so they should not have hit the streets.
That was my concern, Mr. Mayor, that I'd hate to see rate notices go out to people who either have lost their house or have no letterbox to receive them or can't access their property. So if that's been taken care of, I've got no concerns there. Thank you.
Okay.
Follow-up question, Mayor?
Yes.
Or, Councillor Congdon, were you?
Yeah, sorry, I was just in after Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor Carley. Mr. Mayor, if the deferral motion is successful, will the city be putting out any form of press statement, audio-visual statement in relation to assessment notices being sent out as part of its normal process of automated delivery of notices?
The answer is yes. I've already drafted 3 media responses to go tomorrow of audio-visual relating to whichever the situation is tonight. So the answer is yes.
Mayor, I'm just interested in, excuse me, the implications for the budget discussions. Yeah.
Ms. Lay?
Through Mr. Mayor, the financial implications in this report that are based on the initial DFES list, which was approximately 116 properties, but which is increasing, a 12-month full rates credit was in the order of under $200,000. So it's not considered significant impact.
I'll try the voice again, Mayor. Just confirming that would be provided for the possibility that we approve this discount. We could provide for that in the budget discussions this weekend.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money, so it's not going to make a big deal to the budget.
Thank you.
Either way. Ms. Lay, you got a comment?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. It would be applying a 12-month credit to the 2021 rating period. So it would not impact the raising of rates for 21-22.
Now, Councillor Parry, you the seconder? Okay. Now, there was a hand against. Councillor Podovnik, you wish to debate it? Okay. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Simply, we need to get the full information, and currently that's not available to us. Either way, we have dealt with the issue around the current send-out for March, and that was of concern to me in particular. So by doing this, we don't significantly impact the the people that have been so terribly impacted by the fire. And it gives us the opportunity to work with DFS to get full information. There's some 10-odd properties, as suggested. Let's get the detail right, and we'll be able to have those discussions as well when we do our second round of budget discussions for the costs. But in the first instance, whilst the impact has been terrible on the community, we do need to get our detail correct, and I think this is the way to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Parry is the seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason why I'm supporting Councillor Henderson's recommendation is that it allows us to look at the extent of the relief. Now, that's important as well. It's not just the rates being decreased, but how we can help impact the community in its totality. That's important. So, for example, I've talked to the president of the Gidgee Football Club. The issue is not rates, it's basically helping him out and getting rid of his scrap metal and all those things as well. That, to me, is the extent of the relief. Things like that are just as important as rates reductions as well. I understand Councillor Kiley and Councillor Prodovnik's motion. I'm not against giving them rates decreases, but looking at things in its totality is just as important than just applying once-off credits to rate bills. I think we need to look at this extraordinary event properly, do a thorough job, and guarantee we can help the community as much as we can, not just by rate decreases or rate notifications, but its totality to support our community get back on its feet. That's the most important thing. And also by working through this in its totality perspective, we can give them straight relief as well straight away. We can go to our different departments, EMRC for scrap metal, all those things as well. We can do that because it's to the extent of the relief, not just rate credits. That's why I'm supporting it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Prodovnik.
I have a question through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Henderson, if that's okay.
Yeah, you can ask him.
Councillor Henderson, can you just please confirm that at the heart of your motion is a desire to get information about the extent of damage? Is that something that's motivated this motion?
Well, it's about getting all of the information together, but it's, in getting that, we can then look at what relief we can deliver.
Sorry, just that I heard you clearly, and that includes extent of damage?
Well, we need to get all the information.
I'll assume that's a yes. Okay, the reason I asked that question is because Councillor Kiley and I probably had quite a lengthy discussion about this very point in the early stages when I was making some investigations about it.
So this is your debate now, right? You're speaking against it.
Yes, sorry. And basically I've come to the conclusion that it's just fraught with danger when we start to delve into this motion on that level. And I think I really do applaud the city's initiative, which has resulted in two options that's been put to council to consider. It's a very proactive step. It shows we care and it shows leadership. And it's also the right thing to do right now. Both options provide blanket support, and I think that's really important. They're not complicated. People have been identified as impacted by DFS will be put on the list and they'll qualify. It's as simple as that. It's a really simple option, or two options. Both are simple, both are blanket approaches. And the reason I can't support motions that begin to deviate from that is because it complicates what really should be a straightforward offer of support. And I think splitting people, for example, splitting them into categories, say, for example, those who've lost their homes or those who haven't, it's just too simplistic. It doesn't factor in people who may have saved their home but maybe lost a source of income. We don't know if the shed they've lost was their workshop. We don't know if they lost farming equipment. When we start to drill down into this level of detail, it becomes very, very complicated. And I think really people are looking to us for leadership. Option 1 provides rate relief for 5 months, whereas option 2 provides rate relief for the full 12 months. Both options in the report to council provide blanket support for those impacted by the fires. They're not complicated. There's no level of additional bureaucracy, which I'm concerned about. And basically, I'm asking council to actually support option 2. I know it's not there yet, but obviously the city can afford to put these options on the table. If it couldn't afford to apply this concession, it would never have come to council in the first place. So I think it's a terrific opportunity to give people much needed an offer of support right now when they need it, as opposed to just taking a very long time and adding additional bureaucracy to this very simple, what should be a simple process.
Speaker for the motion? Speaker against? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that we can apply one-off credits to ratepayers who have lost their houses or who have had their house badly damaged. And concurrently, and at the same time, we can investigate what else we can do. So there might be other things we need to do to assist the people who are impacted. So we can still gather that information. So offering rate relief right now is something we can do. It's quite easy, it's straightforward, it's what the officers have recommended. And I believe we should go ahead with it immediately. We should not defer it. Councillors, when there's an emergency, you take emergency and immediate action. You don't go, oh, I think I'll defer dealing with that emergency for a month or so. It's something you do straight away. And then, having taken the first emergency action, you can take another emergency action, and another, and another. We can do both these things concurrently. So, councillors, I would urge you not to support this deferral because I don't think it's necessary. I think the staff will look at other options to provide more financial relief or additional assistance, and that can come at the next meeting with another recommendation from the officers, and I'm sure there will be further recommendations in months to come. So, councillors, I urge you to take action, to recognise the hardship and to vote against this deferral, because I think we've got two very good motions, one by Councillor Carley and one by Councillor Brodovnik, that I think address the issue in the way recommended by the officers. Thank you.
Further speakers?
Question.
Question, Councillor Congleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. By deferring this item, does it automatically take off the table Councillor Kiley and Councillor Brodovnik's motions?
If we defer, yes.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they can't come back at a later date.
That's what I was going to ask. So it means they can come back at a later date. Thank you.
No other speakers. Councillor, I'll speak to this.
Yes, I'd like to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, you can go first, Councillor Lucas.
I support the motion of Councillor Henderson, but I'd encourage all those interested councillors, particularly Councillor Brodovnik and Kiley, to meet with Councillor Henderson in the next few weeks, and particularly after one day next week when we're going on a bus tour of the affected areas, so we can then see firsthand the damage, and we might even pick up some more points. So I'd be happy to incorporate the one-off pro rata credit as suggested by Councillor Kiley, but let's incorporate it into one package at one time, and hopefully we'll get unanimous by working together. But once we've seen the situation firsthand for ourselves on that bus tour, and work with staff to come up with the best way we can help our affected residents. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a question, Mayor.
Question, Councillor Kiley.
Is it possible to ask, you've got a number of media releases available, I'd be interested to know if it's possible to put out in that media release that there was general opinion that we want to provide that relief.
That's the whole message is.
Yeah,
we do
I
it.
think that's.
So,
I think in that case I'd
yeah,
support the
absolutely.
deferral and wait.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay. No other speakers. I'll just before I give you a right reply. Councillors, I've been at the Percy Cullen Recreation Centre for a lot of time. Once we close the evacuation centres, the scenario there for people is changing on a daily basis. So we're seeing people come in that are undoubtedly affected because their house is gone. But we're also starting to see people come in who haven't lost their house, haven't so much been impeded by loss of infrastructure, but are still impacted in some small way by the fire. So by not making a decision now, what we're likely to be able to do is spend over the next 30 days, pick up those people that aren't directly affected in the real sense that their house is not burned down and they haven't lost all their infrastructure which impedes them, but they are affected. And I think we can look at a broader base of assistance other than someone who's lost their house or lost their shed. There's a lot of trauma around this fire that doesn't relate to people who lost their house. And a lot of it doesn't relate to people that were even in the fire ground, but were close by. So there's a lot of effect on people in a more general sense that may slip through the cracks if we slide something in today when a 30-day wait to gather that additional information. There's still people coming out of the woodwork who haven't spoken to DFES or anyone else. There's people making a decision now on what their future is, whether they stay or go. So another 30 days, and when the message will be that council's unanimous, if we said, would we want to support them with some kind of rate relief and nothing else, we would all raise our hand. Absolutely we do. Absolutely we do. And we've supported the other relief funds through the city's processes for people out there. So another 30 days will allow us to pick up everybody that needs assistance. And for people to come forward and say, hey, listen, I still need some assistance in some way, shape or form. So we don't want to miss anybody by categorising them down to someone who's lost their house or their job. So, councillors, I ask you to defer it so that we can make sure we get everybody that fair crack at the assistance we get. Thank you, councillors. So, Councillor Podolny.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, just so that I understand, if we support this deferral, does that mean option 1 and option 2 are no longer on the table for at least 3 months? Or can you explain to me what happens if with option 1 and 2?
We're only deferring the decision. That's all we're doing. We're not defeating the motion. We're deferring the decision. They can still come back as an option.
Option 1 and 2.
Yep, still come back at the end. So Councillor Henderson, I'll ask you to close.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think a lot of it's been explained. But, councillors, the key things here are we do need to get more information. An example would be my wife was telling me that a friend of hers didn't lose their house, but a whole stack of the patio was all melted. Insurance won't cover that. So those impacts are the sort of things we need to learn. We need to find out the detail. It's not that we want to take anything off the table. We want to have a look at what it is that we need to do to help our residents that have been so badly impacted. The other thing too is that the city is currently processing applications for people for relief. Lord Mayor's relief fund, there's federal funding and the state funding have all been made available to people that wanted to get those. So rather than talk extensively about all the debate around the table, I think those are the key points, and we need to help our community as much as we can, and by simply deferring, keeping everything on the table, we'll get a better outcome from our community. So please support this. Thank you, councillors.
Those in favour?
Myself.
So it is everybody with the exception of Councillor Johnson, so the motion is carried. That takes care of everything in Part B, so now we move to Part C. The first item is item C 1.1, Councillor Congdon, a revocation motion for Sandown Park, Henley Brook Basketball Courts, Skate Park and lighting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the resolution is to revocation motion. Revoke decision the council made on the 18th of November 2020 ordinary meeting of council in regard to 5.3 Sandown Park, Henley Brook Basketball Court, Skate Park and lighting. Continue with the delivery of the skate park, improvement of the basketball court, additional lighting, Sandown Park and Henley Brook. Note the additional funding of approximately 45,000 to be identified through the budget adjustment process. Advisors submitted accordingly. The reason for the notice of motion to revoke is consultation as a result of a resolution of council of 16th December 2020. Ordinary meeting of council has occurred. Henley Brook Morganfield's residents demonstrated strong opposition to the proposed development, and we agree with their statements. And the we agree are the ward councillors. A notice of motion to revoke decision needs to be signed by 1/3 of the members of the officers, inclusive of the mover. That had occurred.
Thank you. I have a seconder in Councillor Parry. Is there anyone against? There is. Councillor Kiley, you wish to debate it?
Possibly out of not understanding the intent of the motion, and I'd like to hear the intent. I'm a bit confused about the motion, so I'd probably like to hear the debate. Thank you.
Would you like Councillor Conger to explain the motion? It's pretty
Could put a question through you, Mayor. Maybe I'll start with that.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that point 1 is to revoke the decision, basketball court, skate park and lighting, to revoke that, but point 1 is to continue with the delivery of the skate park, improvement of the basketball court and
No,
additional
that was
lighting.
part of the original motion.
Oh, I've got you. That's my confusion.
And on page 502 is the notice of the new motion. Over page.
So he's read the motion that was stood before.
Thank you.
Now
I'm
it's
following.
revoked.
I've caught up now, Mayor.
Caught up
Thank
with
you.
the ball? Caught up with the basketball?
Yep, okay. So I'll ask again, is there anyone against? No one against? I'll declare it carried.
Okay, then.
Now move to item C1.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, do we need to move the notice of the new motion? I think we do.
Yes, move. Yeah, you're right, Councillor.
Thank you.
Move the notice of new motion.
Okay, so the new motion is not continue with the delivery of the skate park, improvement of the basketball court and additional lighting in Sandown Park, Henley Brook.
Seconder and Councillor
Just
Parry.
could I get an amendment?
We'll put it.
I wouldn't like to rule out any aspect, and I'm wondering if we could add something there to express a desire to continue with further consultation for the needs of the community. Continue public consultation into the future to consider what the community actually want in that area.
With your approval, Mr Mayor, the conversation that took place after this meeting and during the meeting with all the residents was to establish a community group to be able to present to Council further measures for Morganfield Sandown Park.
Are we able to...
and that was commensurate.
Could we add that as point 2? As a...
I don't believe... I wouldn't be happy to put it. I think there's a cut and dry motion.
It's up to you, you're the mover, whether you accept or not in the seconder.
Well, no, because I think we've already had this discussion, the 3 ward councillors, with those residents.
I think the fact that you've highlighted it tonight is enough. Thank you.
Okay. Was there anyone against? No, we'll declare that carried. Now move to C1.2. Councillor Johnson proposed amendments to meeting procedures, local law, order of business, council meetings.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, my motion is that Council resolve to request the CEO to commence a review of the City of Swan meeting procedures, local law 2019, and report back to Council with a revised draft. This review should include consideration of the following amendment. A. To replace section 6.23, which currently reads as follows, 6.2, unopposed business. If a member opposes a motion, the presiding member may ask those members opposed to the motion if they wish to debate the motion. If any member responds in the affirmative, the motion is to be debated, otherwise it is put to the vote immediately. With the new section 6.2, unopposed business. 3. If a member opposes the motion, the presiding member may ask if any member wishes to debate the motion, including those in favour of the motion. If any member responds in the affirmative, the motion is to be debated, otherwise it is put to the vote immediately. Part 2, to including in the proceedings at all future ordinary and special council meetings, agenda item 3, acknowledgement of country, and agenda item B, agenda item 4, affirmation of civic duty and responsibility. The reason for the motion is to enable councillors to explain their motions through debate, even where councillors opposing the motion do not wish to debate the item. And 2, to formalise acknowledgement of country. The wording to be used should be the effect of, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Nyungar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present and future. 3, for councillors to collectively acknowledge their declaration of office before each meeting begins. Wording to be used should be the effect of, we make this affirmation in good faith and declare that we will duly, faithfully, honestly and with integrity fulfil the duties of our office for all the people in the City of Swan, according to the best of our judgment and ability. We will observe the City's Code of Conduct and Meeting Procedures local law to ensure efficient, effective and orderly decision-making within this meeting. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Congerton. Is anyone against? There is. Do you need to debate it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, the first part of this motion is about free speech. which is fundamental in a democratic society and should go without question in a council chamber. Surely any councillor, Mr Mayor, who has a motion on the agenda should be able to speak to it if they so wished. But our current meeting procedures facilitate suppression of free speech. The meeting procedures adopted in 2019 say this at 6.23. If a member opposes a motion, the presiding member may ask those members opposed to the motion if they wish to debate the motion. If any member responds in the affirmative, the motion is to be debated, otherwise it is put to the vote immediately. Now, this has been interpreted as meaning that the opposing members can prevent debate. The motion is put to the vote without debate. But what if the opposing members, thinking that they have a majority, choose to oppose without debate? Then the rationale for the motion will never be heard in debate. And we saw today there was an attempt to do that, and yet, despite one councillor saying he was opposed to it and didn't want to debate it, 9 councillors spoke, and it was a really good debate. We heard an awful lot about the traffic issues around the Midland Oval, and the really unusual thing, of course, was that the councillor who didn't want to debate it actually didn't have anything to say, which was really quite interesting. Now, councillors, this kind of thing is giving the appearance, or could give the rise to the appearance, that the decision has already been made behind the scenes. But the Local Government Act was designed to promote transparency and openness. It's not reasonable to have a meeting procedures local law that is contrary to the principles of the Local Government Act. And that's why I'm proposing to change it with this motion. My change makes it clear, without any reservation or qualification, that if any member, including the mover and seconder, wish to debate the motion, then the motion is to be debated. The second part of my motion includes in the agenda an acknowledgement of country using words to be supplied by the Reconciliation and Action Committee. The words are not part of, I gave you are not part of the motion, and they're not going to be, they're not part of the motion. They should not be part of the meeting procedures. They can be changed as we need. I think all councillors would accept an acknowledgement of country. At the moment, sometimes it happens and sometimes it does not. The third part of the motion is about performing our office as councillors to the standard in our declaration of office that we take at the beginning of our term of office. The proposed wording is this. We make this affirmation in good faith and declare that we will duly, faithfully, honestly and with integrity fulfil the duties of our office for all the people in the City of Swan according to the best of our judgment and ability. We will observe the City's Code of Conduct and meeting procedures local law to ensure efficient, effective and orderly decision-making within this meeting. Councillors, I know that other councillors have been considering this type of thing, particularly the affirmation. At one time, I had the view that a prayer would be good, because I do know some other councillors do this, but I rejected this idea as I could not find a suitable prayer and I did not think it would get any support. An affirmation is not a prayer, so I think a secular affirmation based on the declaration of office, which we've all taken and accepted, is a reasonable way to start the meeting. I think it would help settle and focus councillors' minds, remind us of our duty and set an expectation of the standard that the community are expecting of their councillors. And many more people are watching these meetings, so I think that we need to do that. Councillors, currently our meetings begin with a statement of public liability, and I actually think that's the wrong starting point for entry into debate. The public liability statement would still be made, but it would come much earlier in the meeting. And by following the public liability statement with the acknowledgement of country and then the affirmation of office, I think it will change the whole tone of future council meetings for the better. I'm very interested to hear what councillors have to say in response. Are any of the things I'm proposing anything but good things? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Congratton is the seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I could have started off with the Tooth Fairy, Father Christmas and the Easter egg, but anyway. I do support, Councillor Johnson, your motion because I honestly believe that a review is necessary. And I'm very pleased there are some aspects that you've included in this motion to be addressed. And I can assure you, Councillor, under a review, there'll be a whole stack more that need to be addressed. So I do support it. I'm glad you didn't add prayer into there because not everyone has that religious belief and that might constitute different values for people in the room that may necessarily agree with the religious aspect of prayer. So I'm going to support it, and then so we'll see where it goes. Thanks.
Councillor Kylie, speaker against the motion.
Oh, if I could just possibly amend it, Mayor, and that would be 2A, agenda item 3, acknowledgement of country from the Mayor. I'd like to add in from the Mayor. And the other amendment would be that we remove 2B, the affirmation of civic duty and responsibility, given we've done that at the start of our term of office, and I don't see the point in doing that at every meeting.
Councillor Colley, go back to the top. It says for consideration during the review. So that'll be addressed during the review, I would suggest.
Well, that was the other thought too. So that effectively point 2 doesn't need to be considered at all for this, because it would be a total review.
It's up to the mover and the seconder.
I want to keep it, Mr Mayor, because I have no problem adding acknowledgement of country by the Mayor, because it will be the Mayor who has to read it out. But I do wish to keep Part 2B.
Would this be...
unchanged.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson. Would this cement those considerations in a new review?
Not tonight, it won't.
But at a later...
You've asked that to include that in the review, so they'll be included when we go to discussions on the review.
It says actually include in the proceedings at all future ordinary and special council meetings. It doesn't mention the review at all.
Review should include consideration of the following.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you. That's answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Ms Albright, you had something to say?
Through you, Mr Mayor, just to clarify, the motion is written in two parts. So the first part is a review of the meeting procedures local law, and the second part is to include in our proceedings at all future meetings the acknowledgement of country and the affirmation of civic duty and responsibility. So that would not be part of the meeting procedures local law. It would be part of our guidelines and regular meeting procedures.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. A further question, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so just want to, yeah, good point, Mr CEO. So just want to clarify that, councillors. So the motion actually has two parts. It's part one is for consideration with a review, but part two is to include meetings going forward.
Question, Mr Mayor.
Question,
it's not quite clear to me that it is in two parts. It's quite clear to me. I thought when I read this, the review should include the following. It was 1 and 2, not just 1, and then followed by 2 to be endorsed tonight.
So can you clarify that, Councillor
Yeah,
Johnson?
my intention that all of it would be
So one
part
and
of the
two
review. So
are
yes,
both considered.
yeah. So 2A and B, I did actually intend to be part of the review. I wanted the whole thing to be reviewed.
Okay, all right. So
is that your understanding as well?
Possibly, perhaps the number 1 should come down next to 1A. So that says now request blah blah 1 replace 2 include, because as it currently reads, just to clarify, does that clarify it?
Yeah, I think
If you
that's...
remove 1 from before request, drop it down to A, it becomes 1
Yeah,
and 2. Does that make sense?
that makes sense, yeah.
Okay, right. That clarifies. It's all up for consideration. Okay. Now,
Absolutely, positively clear. It is all to be reviewed.
all under part of the review.
For the record.
For the record. Okay, cool. Rightio. Now, go back. Mr. Speaker, against the motion. No one against the vote? Big carrot. Speaking for? I don't think we've had a speaker against yet.
Very quickly, I just want to let Councillor Johnson know I agree with the new 1. Opposed business, got to agree with 2A, acknowledgement of country, should be by the presiding member. It may not be there on a particular night, could be the CEO for whatever reason. But I'm against the affirmation, and I'm just letting Councillor Johnson know there'll be a sticking point for me when it comes back under review. Thank you.
Okay, so go back in. Was there anyone against? Councillor Richardson. Well, I don't know if I've got anyone against yet, have I?
I'm against it. I'm against the motion.
Okay. Well, speak?
Yes,
And
okay.
speak
Well,
against the motion?
I just think the affirmation is totally unnecessary. We've already said it once, and I don't think it needs to be done again, and I don't even think it needs to be reviewed, actually. So that's why I won't support this motion. I think it's unnecessary. It should be taken out. And in fact, I don't even think we need to have the Welcome to Country included in this motion either. I think we should just keep it as a review of the standing orders and keep it simple.
Okay,
That's
thank
it.
you. Yeah, speakers?
Sorry, it's actually acknowledgement of country, not a welcome to country. Just that.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, we've got speakers for. Is there anyone actually, any other speakers going to speak against the motion? Well, in that case, Councillor Moser closed and we can put it to the vote.
Please put it to the vote, Mr Mayor.
Okay, those in favour?
I'm in favour.
Okay, everybody bar Councillor Catalano, so the motion is carried. Okay, that now takes us to C3, 1.3, Councillor Catalano, cancellation of the City's annual community calendar.
Yes, the motion is, I imagine that Council resolved to cancel the City of Swan's annual community calendar, henceforth.
Reason?
Because funds could be spent better in the City of Swan.
Seconder? Councillor Cole, I think you were first. Is there anyone against? There is. We're going to debate it. Question, Councillor Richardson.
Question through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Catalano. In what area would we redirect the funds if it was successful?
I don't think that is a question that is under any consideration. I mean, there's plenty of parks in Eltone Ward that would absolutely be overjoyed. Rainbow Park.
Shade in Eltone. We want more shade in Eltone Ward and parks.
And there's parks that actually haven't even had any attention at all, and they're just yeah, okay. Plenty of opportunities for spending that money.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Catalano, you wish to open the debate?
Oh yes, thank you. Look, love it or hate it, there's definitely a division of opinion out there in the community about the calendar. I remember the night that I was actually voted in. I went over to the Beaches Tavern and had a drink, and one of the locals came up and congratulated me, and he said, "You're going to get rid of the calendar, aren't you?" And that's what I'm doing, because do you know what? I've been thinking that way myself for years. I see it and I just shake my head, because it is so basically anachronistic. Do you know what I mean? It's old-fashioned, it's stale, it's tired. I actually sent the calendar this year to some friends in the UK, and, well, they shook their heads, because I think the first thing that shocked them was pretty much just about every person in the calendar was white, for a start. They couldn't believe it. And they themselves were, just quite absolutely shocked that a local government authority would even produce such an object. The argument out there is that this is not our job. There's plenty of ways for the City of Swan to get information out about councillors, their contact details. I find the sort of self-publicity that the councillors themselves put on the calendar to be very kind of embarrassing. It is great, but it is embarrassing actually. I mean, we should just basically be doing that. We don't need to sort of pat ourselves on the back every year, and it comes at a cost. And the other thing about it is, the calendar has diminished in years. I mean, at one time it was basically delivered to your letterbox, and now it's like, oh, well, we've got to cut the costs back, and now it's like, oh, well, we're going to just put a few in the libraries. Let's just leave the calendar to people who are professional calendar people, companies. If people want a calendar, a paper calendar, they just go down to, one of the supermarkets and buy themselves a calendar. It's not our role. I know there's going to be heaps of arguments about it, coming forth about how, it's a brilliant way to promote the city's work, and it's a brilliant way to, great PR, and but actually, we just need to get down and actually provide services and parks and spend the money in the way that people want their rates to be spent. And if somebody wants a calendar, then they go to the supermarket and buy their own. Although there was a suggestion on the website, which I thought was reasonable, that but actually now I don't think it is. No, I think you just go and buy it, because we don't want to we don't want any of the staff's time caught up in this any longer. It's a distraction. We want the staff to be focused on providing the kind of services and delivery of amenity and parks that people really, really are screaming out there for, and I've been saying that all the time I've been on council. So there's other ways to get the information out there. A small little, with the councillors' contact details and and their photograph on just a little piece of paper in the letterbox is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. Councillor Kiley is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the calendar is fantastic. I love it. I think it's great. The quality of the print, the quality of the pictures, the whole thing is fantastic. But it's not what we should be doing as a council. We shouldn't be putting it out. The pictures are fantastic, other than the fact that Eltone Ward don't get on the front page. It's actually Fish Market Reserve in Guildford again. Another thing for Guildford where we should be spreading those images around. Maybe Ballajura somewhere. I think the staff have done a brilliant job. And the photographs are fantastic, so credit to them, to the work they have done on it. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be where we're spending the money. And if you just think back to a couple of debates back, we're talking about the Warraloo bushfires, and that's where we should be spending the money, maybe this time around at least. We could be spending the money in better places. We've got shade that we need for the Eltone Ward and parks and the like. We can find better uses for it. Just bear in mind that when we put the calendar out, we're still only getting about 30% of, at the maximum, we're getting only about 30% of people actually bothering to vote. So even when we distribute it to every household in the city of Swan, we weren't getting the response that we wanted in terms of actually participating in the voting. It wasn't having the effect. But let's look at a modern form of technology, and if we did it through Facebook and we used the same money to go to broadcast to broadcast the idea through Facebook, get out and vote this coming up, these October elections. Get out and vote, make a difference. List all the things that we actually do for the community. We would be spending a lot of, I think the marketing term would be penetration. The penetration to get to the ratepayers would be much greater if we spent that money on Facebook or some modern form of marketing, media and the like. So I can't support. I don't want us to produce the calendar again. It's had its day. I think we don't need to do it. We could spend our money in other places, and possibly the Warraloo bushfires is just one prime example. So well done to staff for producing a great calendar, but I think we need to focus on other things and spend the ratepayers' funds in a lot better fashion. Thank you.
Speaker against the motion. Councillor Congleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd perhaps like to look at addressing some of the comments made by Councillor Catalano. The division of opinion. I am unaware of any division of opinion in the Whiteman Ward, Ballajura, Brabham or Henley Brook. Certainly I haven't received any emails asking me to support the striking out the calendar for the next foreseeable time in future. And I've had a lot of comments about how nice this year's calendar was. And I think it was a very nice production. The comment that there are plenty of other ways to spread the message. Well, sadly, in the case of councillors, there are not plenty of other ways unless we are talking about social media, which may be by councillors, the city's website, where people may not go to. So I'm not quite sure about plenty of the other ways, particularly when a comment was made by Councillor Kiley, which is, I might have even been, Councillor Catalano, a little piece of paper in the letterbox would do. I don't know how we get a little piece of paper in a letterbox economically, because we have 62,000 letterboxes to put that little piece of paper in. So, and I think that would cost a lot more in respect to the calendar. And then there was comments in relation to wasn't used for electioneering. We didn't see a rise in people voting. I don't know how that's directly related to the calendar. That's not what the calendar was for, to promote electioneering. And as for the embarrassing content, I find that a really weird comment. The content that was in the calendar was content provided by the councillors. We provided the content. If you may recall, we were asked to provide a place we wanted to photograph, and we were asked to deliver some words in relation to that place. So if there were embarrassing content involved, and you think you embarrassed yourself, maybe where you picked and what you said would be up to you. In closing, Mr Mayor, there is another one of these. We have not had a consultation structure in relation to the calendar. So we haven't really gauged whether it's good, bad or ugly. And I think before we start to wipe something off because a councillor thinks it's embarrassing content, or a councillor thinks there's other ways to spend the money, or there's a division of opinion, I'd like to see maybe where this goes in the future, and maybe we should have is it called a survey monkey structure done, or a survey, electronic survey done, where we can get an opinion on items like this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against the motion. Councillor Parry, you are first.
Yeah, I just got a quick question. All the councillors, what does $25,028,360,000 represent? The amount we spend on parks. That's a huge amount of money in regards to that, isn't it, councillors? And let's look at the Dayton area as well. $2.3 million spent, or in budgeted, for the Dayton Local Park passive. $3.530 million. Dayton Local Park. Sorry, Dayton Neighbourhood Park. Fair chunk of money's going to Dayton, isn't it? It's 25 million.
Point of order, Mayor.
25 million.
Point of order.
Well, yeah, I want to hear this one. Yeah.
The fact that Councillor Catalano, myself and Councillor Lucas are getting good money spent in Dayton and Altone Ward is not our fault. You know, if you want to fight for those dollars that we've been getting in the Altone Ward, then you should fight a little bit harder for Ballajura.
I'm glad you just said that,
Okay,
Councillor.
we won't have any.
I've got this. No,
Carry on,
Councillor. No, I'm more than happy to take this one. $3.518 million spent in Brabham. And also the acceleration of parks in your local area was done by Councillor Congdon and I. Just a little point of reference there, Councillor. I'd just like to raise that. Thank you very much. Now, in regards to the $60,000 spent, it's not much in the context of the whole thing. I think it's worthwhile because it's 0.01% spent in parks. It's not much, is it, councillors? Thank you very much.
Speaker for the motion. For the motion. Okay. Thought so, okay. Speaker against the motion. Yeah, you're right, Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we've heard some good arguments for and against, but the city's calendar presents itself to our diverse community. And in diverse, I also mean our older and aged community. got a couple of comments here in regards to what residents say about it. This is one piece of information I welcome in my household as a point of reference. It is read, it is referenced, and when it is under your nose, you use it. Quite honestly, most folk wouldn't think of going to the computer for the info this little gem has in it. Another lady, and I think this reminds us fairly seriously that we do have to be careful, myself included, of discriminating against a section of our community that appreciate it and are technology limited and are not confident about technology. I'm 82 and love my calendar each year. I don't need to spend up to $25 buying one, and it gives me all the info I need. I actually feel like I'm getting something from the city. I can see who my local and city councillors are. I can go straight to it and give them a ring. I had that happen a couple of weeks ago actually. Had a lady ring from Bellevue. She said, I was looking through the calendar, being aware of all the councillors, and I read your spiel, and some of those aspects interested me, and I rang you for a chat, and I met with her, and that was really encouraging. Every local government has ways that it promotes itself creatively and for the benefit of that local government. Our calendar is one of those ways we do that, and in years to come, that may change. At the moment, we see very real benefit, and if you read the officer's comment, you will see the facts about the very real benefit. And it promotes our city in many and varied ways. This is just one way. It's also a bit of a two for the price of one. You get a really beautiful calendar, you don't have to go and buy one, and you get a heap of information you can refer to if you're not tech savvy, and it's right there for you. I mean, I'm reasonably tech savvy and I still refer to it if I need to. So councillors, let's have a think about it. It's a great way to promote our city, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. Councillor Broderick, I see your hand up out the corner of my eye just then. Okay, you're speaking
Against the motion.
Okay.
I just wanted to provide some commentary as well. Councillor Catalano, I actually agreed with her statement about division of opinion, simply because I did do quite a few posts on Facebook just to gauge that opinion, and I can confirm that it was extremely diverse. I got over 300 responses back. I'm still going through them. And the reason I'm not going to do a breakdown here on Facebook is because the truth is Facebook is interesting to gauge a certain opinion, but it's true that a lot of people don't use Facebook and they don't like Facebook, and I don't think it's really a true reflection of our community. What I did find helpful in Facebook was really some of the comments that came back, and what it's done, it's kind of drawn my attention, I guess, to the fact that it's probably distribution is something that we can review. For example, some people didn't know that it was even being published still because it didn't come into their letterbox. Again, the city have done a really great job putting it on their website. The city has done a really good job getting it on Facebook, but people aren't always looking at those channels. So some of the suggestions that came back I thought were really helpful. So I'm asking if council can please not throw the calendar away at this point. We have cut distribution, we have cut costs. I think there's an opportunity here to review distribution, and I think we need to give it one more chance. So I'd really appreciate if we could hang on to it, just review the distribution and just see how it goes. Oh, also, the final thing I wanted to say is I don't support this argument. It's either the calendar versus amenity. I don't think it needs to be that. I think we really can have both.
Okay. Speaker, question, Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got three questions. The first is, what is the cost of the calendar? I think it was raised, but I can't recall.
Okay, Ms. Lay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the 2021 calendar has cost just over $46,000.
Thank you. And is the calendar recyclable?
Ms. Lay, as a calendar? Probably not.
No,
For the
okay.
next, for the next 10 years, anyway.
How many did we have left over last year?
Ms. Lay?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we had in the order of about $7,000. That's why we reduced printing from $27,000 to $20,000.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lay, was that 7,000 calendars left over?
In the order of that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Any speakers against the motion?
Yes.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, councillors. I've listened very interested to the debate, and I've actually checked with a few of my neighbours, and they speak very well of the calendar. And it's mainly not only the pictures of the young children this year on each page, the major page, which they've said has attracted their children to look at it, but it's the history lesson. So on January we're looking at 2 young children playing cricket, but underneath it gives you a history of Lilac-Hill Park and talks about the park and its association with cricket. Then you go in February, there's 2 young children in school uniform sitting on the bench, and it talks about the old Midland Junction school and gives you a history lesson of what it was then, back in the 1890s, to its current location and the other fact that's now the Midland Junction Arts Centre, surrounded by the Dome Cafe, the Principal Bar restaurant. The same with the Rathbase Pier, with the striking pose in front of a twin crop jet. And then it talks about the history of the pier. And every page, Fish Market Reserve, the Midland Railway Workshops, the Garrick Theatre, the Whiteman Park Village, and the train station and the Transport Museum up there. So every month we get a story and a history lesson about our city. Then when you look at the rear of the calendar, it gives you all the recycling information about what you can and can't recycle. It talks about the containers or change refund points. It advertises our Swan Active and what you can get out of the City of Swan Recreation Centre. Then the last 2 pages just a mirage of different pictures from pretty well every ward, but back in the 1800s or early 19th or 20th century. You can contact your councillor, that's easy. But it also gives you information about domestic violence, where you go to if you need help, Crime Stoppers, the police numbers, aged care, community crisis helpline, kids helpline, family helpline, parenting helpline, beyond blue legal aid. It is a myriad of information which is a one-stop shop. And yes, the councils have the opportunity of selecting a location and giving about a 2 or 3 paragraph bio about either themselves or what their aspirations are on council. To me, it is a cheap form of promoting the City of Swan. And over my term on council, that is the one thing we don't do very well, is promoting the City of Swan and all our attributes and all the great facilities that we have. So I cannot support the abolition of the community calendar. I reluctantly supported the downsizing of the distribution and the way we distribute it, and perhaps that could come back to review. But if you wanted to contact one of our sports centres, the administration, any of our community play clubs or play offices, all that information is there, it's freely available, it's packaged up in a very visually pleasing manner, and I could not support its complete removal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Okay, I don't know much more we can cover, given that we've already had 9 speakers. So, Councillor McNamara, I'll ask you to speak, and then I'll ask Councillor Catalano to close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm against this particular calendar, this particular motion, because I would prefer this calendar to be distributed by Australia Post or by the couriers, the people who put them in each letterbox. I would like every home to get this particular calendar, but that's so. I'll just deal with what a number of councillors have spoken about, and that is, number one, Mr. Mayor and Mr. CEO and councillors, I am not here to make up numbers. I am here, number one, as a City of Swan councillor for Whiteman Ward, which takes in Brabham, Ballajura. I was involved in every single item that was financed for Brabham and for Whiteman. I am also involved in every decision that's made to spend money in Ellenbrook and in Altone. So I am not here, Mr. CEO and Mr. Mayor, to make up numbers, but I do want it acknowledged predominantly by my fellow ward councillors that I am a Ballajora Whiteman ward councillor and involved in every single thing that happens there. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. On that note, Councillor Catalano, I ask you to close.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm glad I raised this issue because it's certainly been very passionate defence of what effectively is a calendar. I mean, sometimes I wish we'd get as passionate about much more important things in the lives of our ratepayers. The point is, and I think the 7,000 that was left over last year is just evidence of this is on its way out through basically natural selection. And I've heard quite a few people say, "Oh, not now, maybe later." Well, why not now? I mean, there are other ways, there are better ways of getting that information out there. It is very old-fashioned, and I do think that it doesn't reflect the diversity of the city. No doubt this year's calendar will do that because I've raised it, because I thought that there was that, that was the comment that I had from overseas, so no doubt we'll get a calendar this year that will be a little bit more diverse. And I think that the City of Swan, if it was really, meeting the mark for ratepayers, its ratepayers, would not have to be involving itself in this kind of self-promotion. The information will get out there and there'll be no need for this kind of self-promotion. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Those in favour? I have Councillor Catalano, Kiley and Scanlon. The rest are against, so the motion fails. Takes us now, councillors, to the last one. C1.4, Councillor Johnson report on the feasibility of achieving a net zero CO2 emission within 10 years.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I begin, I just draw Council's attention to the amended notice of motion on page 35 of the order paper. It's different to the one in the agenda. Mr. Mayor, my motion is that Council resolve to include $60,000 in the 2021-2022 budget to report on options for the City of Swan operations to achieve a target of net zero CO2 emissions, and 2, direct the CEO to produce such a report for consideration at a future meeting of Council. And the reason for the motion is to meet community expectations that action will follow the Council's recognition of a climate emergency.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Kiley, is anyone against? There is. Okay. I'm assuming we're going to debate it, so off you go, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this motion is about demonstrating our strategic leadership as a council to the electors, residents and ratepayers by looking at options to reduce City of Swan operations CO2 emissions to net zero. Councillors, why is the global community targeting net zero CO2 emissions? The reason is to stop the CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere increasing beyond current levels of about 410 parts per million. Why do we need to do this? Because right now the amount of CO2 is steadily increasing by about 2 parts per million a year, and because CO2 is a greenhouse gas. What's the greenhouse gas? The greenhouse gas is caused by visible sunlight. The greenhouse effect is caused by visible sunlight passing through the atmosphere, heating the Earth, and then being re-emitted as infrared light. Infrared light cannot easily pass through the CO2 in the atmosphere. As you heard Professor Blair say at the Agenda Forum, CO2 looks black in the infrared spectrum of light. The more CO2 in the atmosphere, the less infrared escapes and instead is absorbed by the atmosphere, and so the atmosphere heats up. And this leads to the whole world heating up, as we know is known as global warming. This is all well known. The science of greenhouse gases has been around for over 100 years. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was set up by governments to provide scientific and policy advice to governments. The IPCC says that human activities have caused 1 degree C of change from pre-industrial levels. The IPCC says we are on track to reach 1.5 degrees C of warming from pre-industrial levels sometime between 2030 and 2050. The consequences of exceeding 1.5 degrees C are likely to be severe environmental degradation through climate change, drought, fires, habitat loss and flooding. As Professor Blair advised, most of the city of Swan will be underwater as a result of rising sea levels if the warming continues above 1.5 degrees C. Professor Blair was one of the recipients of the Prime Minister Scott Morrison's 2020 Prime Minister's Prize for Science. He was awarded this for his contribution to the discovery of gravitational waves. He is a trusted advisor on scientific matters. Scott Morrison's current target for Australia, as defined in the Paris Agreement in 2006, is a 26% to 28% cut in CO2 emissions below 2005 levels by 2030. So getting back to net zero CO2. So net zero CO2 emissions is the target emission level agreed by the IPCC and adopted by most governments. I understand the Labour state government has a target of net zero CO2 by 2050. The Liberal state leader Zach Kirkup announced on Wednesday the 10th of Feb a target of net zero CO2 by 2030. You can see that in the Liberals' new energy jobs plan, which some of you councillors have a copy of in front of you. Now, some people say that addressing climate change is not the business of local government. Councillors, the IPCC says in the 2019 report on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels, and it's a complicated sentence, but it addresses our issue. A mix of adaptation and mitigation options to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees implemented in a participatory and integrated manner can enable rapid transitions in urban and rural areas. These are most effective when aligned with economic development and when local and regional governments and decision makers are supported by national governments. So they're telling us that local governments need to address this. I've got about half a page left to go. Councillors, the IPCC is saying that local government needs to take action to enable rapid transition in urban and rural areas. That's where we are. Both parties at state government level are saying we need to take action. Our local scientists, who are trusted advisors, are saying we need to take action. Our local community, especially the younger people, and we heard from a teenager tonight, they want to see some action more than anybody else. If we as a council have recognised a climate change emergency, we surely need to take some action. We have become confident at dealing with multiple emergencies at once. Now is the time to tackle the biggest climate emergency we have, which is climate change. The motion before you is for a report on options for the city operations, so it's not residents or businesses, to achieve a target of net zero CO2 emissions. It does not set a target timeframe. As we have seen at state government level, the Liberals are proposing 2030, Labour are proposing a 2050 net zero CO2 target. Councillors, whatever target we eventually set, on its own, it will not solve the problems we have seen caused by climate change in the city of Swan. But the city needs to make its own contribution, even if it is just a small one, to achieving net zero CO2 emissions in Australia and globally. We owe it to future generations to start down this path of reducing CO2 emissions to zero. Mr Mayor, everyone is expecting us to set a net zero CO2 target, so please, let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, it's your time. Councillor Kite is seconder.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll draw councillors' attention to the teenage boy who came and spoke earlier tonight, and the Mayor unfortunately had to cut him short. It wasn't any issue with the Mayor not wanting to hear him, it was just that he only had the 2 minutes to speak, so I don't blame the Mayor for that. But what I did do is race out after him and say, listen, we've only got halfway through your speech, do you mind if I take it and read it out? Because as it turns out, he's a 14-year-old boy, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I would hate to not listen to what she had to say on this issue, something that's so important to them. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'd like to read out the full speech made by Charles Porter from Swanview. He's 14 years old, and these are the people that will inherit this place, inherit our community and take over from us in the future when we're long and gone, and the impacts of climate change will have its effects. So, Charles, I hope you're watching at home, and as a former high school teacher, I'll give you an A+ for this speech, by the way, and give you tomorrow off school if you like too, by the way. It says, I'm here, as you may know, to give my support to the recently proposed notion of this council reaching net zero emissions. There are so many reasons why this change is absolutely necessary for the continuation and function of not only... is that able to be stopped so I can get through this at all? There are so many reasons why this change is absolutely necessary for the continuation and function of not only this council but the rest of the world. Climate change is the most devastating and important Climate change is the most devastating and important and difficult issue humans have ever been unlucky enough to face. Me and all the other young people have been born into the middle of the world's most difficult, frustrating and utterly deadly problem. It is beyond time for proper action on the climate catastrophe to start occurring, and there should be no question of this council doing what is right. I'm so sick of all these problems being created and sustained by the generations before me for short-term self-interest and unsustainable continual economic gain. These next 10 years we have left to act has never been matched in importance by any other time period on earth. These next 10 years are the years where we earn our place on the planet. These next 10 years are not a time for procrastination, for idle action, for fooling around, debating whether the issues exist or not. We need action. We need it as soon as possible. You can help save the world with a simple vote and dedication. I know some of you will be thinking that I don't know what these words and phrases mean, that I am just a child repeating what has been said to me by extremist left-wing parents and teachers, that I don't understand the way the world works, that I'm a believer in conspiracies. Well, let me tell you this, I am not stupid, I am not ignorant, and my daughter, by the way, would tell me the same sort of thing. I'm not repeating random words and phrases I've heard. I'm scared. I'm scared about what is happening to our planet, scared about what will happen to the innocent and unsuspecting creatures we share our planet with. If you believe that caring deeply for other living beings is extremist, foolish, a conspiracy, then I'm afraid that you need to seriously consider your own actions. Time is running out, and this is pretty much where we got to last time. Time is running out. We must act now, and all of you with influence and power over an area containing people, wildlife and a portion of our planet have the wonderful ability denied to many of us young children that you can make a difference to a whole section of our planet, that you can have an impact on many people's lives, that you can play a major role in the fight against the world's deadliest issue. When the going gets tough, when you wonder whether acting on this issue is the right choice, just ask yourself, if we have a future, do you want to be remembered as the heroes who helped save the entire planet, or do you want to be remembered as the people who didn't act and allow the lives of trillions to be ruined forevermore? Thank you. Charles Porter, Swan View, 14 years old.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. Speaker against the motion? An amendment? Councillor Congleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My amendment would be that Council resolved to include $60,000 in the draft 2021-22 budget and to report on options and costings for the City of Swan operations to achieve a net zero CO2 emissions.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, that now becomes the motion. Right, now, going back to Councillor McNamara. Is there anyone else speakers against? Councillor McNamara, Speaker. Yep. John, you wish to speak? No? Speaker for the motion. Yes. Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So, there's a new report from the Climate Council that found the cost of climate-driven extreme weather events in Australia has doubled since the 70s, and by 2038 could cost the Australian economy as much as $100 billion every single year. So this brings me to a very important fact for us all. City of Swan expenditure on operations. Renewable energy, particularly solar energy, which is ideal for Western Australia, is just getting cheaper and cheaper. There's a reason other than climate change to support Councillor Jansen's motion, and that's the city's budget. Now, I know you all thought I'd stand up here and talk to you about climate change, because you know I believe in climate change science. But I know some of you are a little unsure about that, so I thought economics might appeal to you more. So Western Australians would benefit from new jobs, growing industries and cheaper power under the plan proposed by the WA opposition. It would also protect people from worsening climate impacts. It just makes sense. According to the article, under the Liberal opposition's plan unveiled, WA would be powering its largest grid entirely with renewable energy by 2030, including the phasing out of all government-owned coal-fired power stations within 5 years. Have a state government that operates with net zero emissions by 2030, get around on clean public transport by 2030, benefit from new jobs, cheaper power with 4,500 megawatts of new solar and wind by 2030. Former West Australian energy expert climate councillor Greg Bourne said a low-carbon global economy presents a huge opportunity for Western Australia, which could become a major exporter of rare earth minerals, renewable hydrogen and green steel. Lithium is in demand, nickel is in demand. Western Australia can catch in on the growing global demand for rare minerals, as well as endless supply of sun and wind. All Western Australians will benefit from a government that invests in clean industries that are rapidly growing, said Mr Byrne. They found that 10,000 jobs could be created in Western Australia while also tackling climate change, primarily through ecosystem restoration and revegetation, very important in the City of Swan, large-scale renewable energy, transmission and storage. Every state and territory in Australia is rolling out zero-emission plans. Every one of us are. The faster we reach net zero emissions, the quicker we will benefit from cheaper power, quieter streets, cleaner cities and more comfortable homes and workplaces. All our major trading partners and allies around the world are committing to reaching net zero, and they're stepping up their plans to get there, including the USA, United Kingdom, European countries, Japan, are actively considering carbon tariffs on countries that aren't doing enough on climate change like Australia. The world is rapidly changing and we risk missing out on economic opportunities and being left behind. There is every reason to support this motion, and I encourage all of you to consider your own reasons to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we saw last month the item 2.1, our Sustainable Environment Strategy Review, come before Council. We saw a range of amendments and further amendments requesting net zero target emissions, requesting plans and schedules to achieve this target. All great considerations. Councillors, I don't doubt we're all concerned about climate and about our environment. It went on to look at a deferment. Councillors, we ended up that we would approve the draft Sustainable Environment Strategy to be released for public advertising for a period of 42 days. We go back to our officer's comment and we look and reconcile that to some of the statements made there. And we know that the city officers are fully committed to reducing our organisation's carbon footprint. They're already implementing substantial actions in this area. The development of a net CO2 emissions target does present unique challenges, they say, and it requires a degree of prediction regarding the ever-changing policy, economic, technological and legislative context that will impact the implementation of actions to meet such a target. And yes, I hope we have taken the time to continue reading the officer's comment there just to reconcile this to this motion and to our environmental strategy that has just gone out for consultation. So we saw those amendments through that motion last month that were put forward and that we now see in this motion. Councillors, yes, we need action. Yes, we need to seriously consider aspects of a long-term environmental sustainability strategy, but in a practical, collaboratively aligned, three-tiered government way and a strategic way. We know that our Sustainable Environmental Strategy review is now out for public comment. Within the review is a section for carbon reduction that the community can comment on. We need to allow for our community to consider this review, to make comment, to have input, to provide comments and thoughts that they can air. Community need to be consulted before we decide on a costing, before we look at anything else. We're constantly being reminded of this by many of us in this chamber. Why are we now putting the cart before the horse, making a decision before consulting with our community? Come on, let's be consistent. Broader chatter in past weeks across multiple Facebook pages indicates varied feedback, and this therefore reinforces the need for the community to have their say and to provide the feedback. I'm looking forward to that feedback. Then, as we know, we will have a briefing to Council on the feedback we receive. In the backs of our heads, we can consider costings, we can consider capabilities. Then we can consider our community's feedback. We can look at the fluid nature of this complex issue and its constantly changing face, and it is a constantly changing face. We can consider our city budgets in the context of what we as a local government can practically do, what state government is doing and what federal government is attaining to. Councillors, before we ascertain what a reasonable and practical target may be, we need to understand a lot of variables and look at how we accommodate the rapidly changing face of this issue. As Mr Ellsbury commented earlier today, and I quote, "Targets are only relevant if they're achievable," which is very true. This issue, as part of our environmental strategy review, is something that is going to require a detailed roadmap that entails the collation of community feedback, a complex study into the city's capacity to achieve certain targets based on a balanced and well-stewarded budget. Yes, councillors, we are acting. Yes, we understand the importance of climate and the environment and the states of urgency we are in. Yes, we are, through these processes, demonstrating strategic leadership to our community. Some say, yes, it's not the business of local government, it is our business, and we're going to do what we need to do in that balanced way. We do need to recognise the importance of climate and environment, but the report, the considerations of how much, when, if, how, why, needs to be done after that community consultation.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. That's your 5 minutes. Speaker for the motion. Yes, a question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to Councillor McCulloch. I'd just like to ask how we will consider the costings and achievability of zero emissions without this report.
Well, that is something to consider.
Okay. Speaker for the motion. Speaker against. Speaker against, say, Councillor Congleton. Yes.
Sorry, I thought you said for the motion.
Well, I did, then I said against, then you put a hand up.
No, but I was putting my hand up when you're going for the motion.
So you're speaking for it. Right, go on then.
Well, I want to have a discussion, Mr Mayor. Whether I vote for it or don't vote for it will happen at the end.
Getting tired this time of night with your hand, I can tell.
Thank you very much indeed. My reservations in all of this, I think everyone understands our world is changing. But my reservations in respect of getting to zero emissions in a relatively short period of time, and I'm very pleased that Councillor Johnson removed the 10 years and hasn't got an end date, is that some local governments are conning their ratepayers in respect of being carbon neutral when they're actually buying their carbon credits in either India or in China. And I can actually relate to two major local authorities in the eastern states. And when I talk major, I'm talking major capital authorities who invest in carbon credits, would you believe, in coal-fired power stations, which goes completely against where we are in respect of this. The Australian Local Government Climate Review stated that a lack of funding and resourcing are the most significant barriers to reducing emissions in both corporate and community efforts. A large number of councils have no budget officially allocated to reduce emissions. I would probably like to be reminded by one of my learned colleagues to the amount of money that the City of Melbourne spent in offshore credits to achieve zero emissions.
6 million.
Thank you. I thought it was 6 point something million.
6 million.
Sorry, are you into calling a point of order or?
Well, can you wait till Councillor finish speaking, please?
Councils and communities need to state that federal support to deliver effective strategies and reduce community emissions are important. And we do have an issue because trying to get the three governments involved in this particular sphere is always very difficult. Emissions reduction budgets are correlated to overall population, and the gross regional product and socio-economic index for areas need to be considered. So whilst we understand the benefits that might come from a net zero CO2 emission and what it might imply in terms of the economic base, we need to be very mindful that the city, until it receives its, I think, appropriate sustainability reports and community feedback, aren't going down the path of investing $2 and $3 or $4 or $5 million of its ratepayers' money to get a zero emission by whatever target year, if it's 2050.
Okay. I'm not sure which side of the fence that was on. Speaker against the motion. Councillor McNamara.
Mr Mayor, climate change. I am not a climate change denier or denial person. Climate changes all the time. That's the reason we have seasons. We have 4 seasons, the climate changes. 20,000 years ago we had global cooling, and I'm wondering whether or not the same people shouting at the moment for global warming would be up in arms about global cooling at that particular time if they were around the place. I think they would be, just for, have I got this on? I have, just for something to do. I asked a question from one of our deputants the other evening at the last meeting last Wednesday night about children being told by adults, and asked a question about kids being worried and whatever. Tonight was a great example about children being extremely worried about their future. Mr Mayor, they might be genuine, the worries might be genuine, but the worries came from somewhere. The worries didn't come from the boy's heart or whatever. They came from either a book or learning or his parents or his teachers. They did not come from Mother Nature. The issue is, Mr Mayor, that the federal government want 2050. The state government want 2030. Somebody over in the US of A said that there's 5 years left in this. First of all, they said 10 years. And then they changed their mind a few months later and said there's 5 years left in this world. Last Wednesday night, Councillor Johnson asked the professor, or one of the professors or whatever, how long do you think we have? And he says, I don't know. But Midland will be underwater in a short space of time. It's all about the worry and worrying people.
Sorry, I have a point of order. Sorry, John.
That's okay.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to point out that the Professor didn't say Midland would be underwater shortly. He said he could not predict the time it would be underwater. It cannot be predicted because it's rising at such an exponential rate. We don't know.
Thank you for your point of order. I think
Councillor McNamara actually made that point, that he asked the question, didn't say he didn't know. So carry on, Councillor.
Yeah. If I mistook the actual answer, then that's fine. But the actual statement by the professor was that at some time Midland will be underwater if we don't do something about it. That's what he said. Right. So, what I'm saying is, climate change is something that happens from the point of view on an ongoing basis in this world. We have had many spins of the Earth from the point of view. We even had changes of the polar whatever. So we had north versus south, and south. It just switched over. That was Mother Nature. That wasn't because we burned coal or we burned turf or we burned logs and we knocked down trees or whatever. It was because Mother Nature decided that it was going to happen, and it will happen. There's nothing we can do about it if we do nothing. It will happen. If we do something, we're only worrying about ourselves. We have a hell of a lot more to worry about than tomorrow's whether it's going to snow or in Gidgegannup or whether it's going to rain in Gidgegannup. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But I'm not going to spend $60,000. I'm not going to agree to spend $60,000 on investigating something that we don't know about. What do we spend the money on? Investigating somebody's speeches, investigating somebody's views from the point of view of their education. 20 years ago, I get a phone call from one of the people that was here last week, in excess of 20 years ago, maybe 22 years ago, asking me to support global warming, asking me to support, from the point of view of this council, to try and drive the global warming issue. 20 years ago. What has happened in the meantime? We've had cold weather, we've had hot weather, we've had storms, we've had fires, we've had lots of stuff. But that was going to happen anyway, whether I got that phone call or not. So, I am not going to support this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's your 5 minutes. Sorry, now, Councillor Richard, you had a question. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just Councillor Congerton. I just had a quick question in regard to just my first to consider that debate. Could you just tell me who the major parties were in the eastern states that you were saying were buying carbon credits?
The City of Melbourne, all the carbon credits of the City of Brisbane.
Okay, now, Speaker for the motion. Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. Well, I wasn't actually going to speak on this because I've spoken on it before, but, well, there's a number of things. Investigate something we don't know about. I'm sorry, Councillor McNamara, but it's something you don't know about. Then you go and investigate it. That's why you do the investigation. And even if there is division of opinion out there as to whether climate change is a natural phenomena. Well, first of all, whether climate change is real, that's a question out there. There's a division of opinion. Secondly, whether climate change is the result of CO2 emissions. I mean, that's another question that needs investigation if there's division of opinion. So there you are. We've already got a couple of questions that need investigation. So that maybe could be part of this, but the thing is that the sustainability report and this investigation into options for achieving the net zero emissions, why can't they be done together? Because let's just say that CO2 is responsible for climate change. Hey, guess what? We're ahead of the ball. We're actually ahead of the game. We've actually got a report that suggests that there's really ways that the City of Swan can reduce its emissions. So I'll go back to the calendar because, I mean, you know, $60,000 we can't spend. The calendar that we're all so passionate about in this room costs about that amount of money. I think I know what young people would be thinking. And I think I know there might be a lot of people that would say, well, actually, maybe the $60,000 is better spent on actually investigating options in case the scientists are right that CO2 does have an effect on climate. Because guess what? We'll be ahead of the ball. Now, you know, and that's the other thing. I mean, why do we have to wait for the state government? Why do we have to wait for the federal government? Like, why can't we, like, be a little bit more proactive and, you know, leaders and spend that money now and come up with these options? There's no question about, oh, we have to abide by these options. They're just options. You know what? Knowledge is power. So, you know, you have these options, then you never know. You might be able to use them, you might be able to put them into practice. Now, I don't think that this motion at all suggests that the City of Swan should purchase green credits from overseas. I mean, that might be one of the options, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of other options that will be investigated and will be brought to council in this report. That's what the report's for, to bring in all the options. So, you know, let's do it. I mean, and we've got this, you know, we've got this urgency, and whilst there's some of us in this room might not feel there's an urgency, obviously there's quite a large proportion of people that do, and we have a responsibility to actually, you know, be respectful of their fears and to provide them with information that either addresses their fears, if in fact CO2 emissions do contribute to climate change, or we've also, you know, if the fears come to be unfounded, we've still got options there, you know, that, you know, you just might be able to put them to other purposes. I mean, it's always good to look at, you know, rationalising your pollution, let's just say, if you want to call CO2 a pollution. So the worry's there, the worry is in the community. Let's be respectful of it. Let's respond to it. It's only the cost of a calendar after all.
Thank you, Councillor Keller. Any further speakers? No? Well, I'll rise to speak to this one. One thing was mentioned here tonight is that we have just gone out with our environmental strategy for consultation, a key document in framing the city's direction environmentally in years to come. No one is denying climate change exists. It's been going on since a rock fell out of the sky and killed the dinosaurs. It was called the Ice Age, and it's been going on ever since. And no one can deny it's happening. But while we're running around trying to produce a report, we've got to remember that we are actually already ahead of the game. The City of Swan has more hybrid electric cars than any other local government that we know of, certainly in Western Australia, at 50. Some of the supposed green councils, like Fremantle, have 3 or 4. But we are way ahead of the game, and that's growing. But what we're looking about here is making a decision to spend money without going to the community and saying, do you really want us to pursue this? And we're doing that through our environmental strategy. It will be premature for us to take another direction prior to that report. It would also be premature for us to make a decision without giving the 4 councillors that attended the Global Warming Conference in Melbourne last February to produce their report to council. And Councillor Richardson mentioned it the other day that it was coming to council. And I'm happy to make space next Wednesday if that can be happened. So, obviously didn't like what I said. Hope it's the right sort. So, councillors, let's follow the process we have in place of going out to our community when we go to our consultation process, get the feedback from them, because this is a divided issue. And there's a lot of different opinion in our community, and we need to listen to a whole lot of them. So, on that, I can't support that motion. Councillor Johnson, I'll ask you to close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to thank councillors for their contribution to this debate, and I must admit I'm finding it quite hard to actually come up with a response to some of the comments. First of all, our environmental review of our sustainability strategy we can continue to do that. We can continue to do that concurrently with the report that I'm proposing. I think another point that's been made is that we need to have more community consultation on this subject. Well, community consultation is a good thing, and I anticipate that the report itself will suggest there should be community consultation about climate change and setting net zero CO2 emissions targets. However, I think we can see that the overwhelming evidence coming in from outside, from the IPCC, from the Australian Commonwealth Government, from the state government, and the state opposition, is that this is the target that needs to be set. The only thing that it does not set in this motion is the time frame. Well, councillors, that's why we need the report. I don't think that the environmental review that we're doing is going to come up with that. This is a very targeted report. It's about something that our community are expecting us to do. I think it's clear and crisp what this is needed. It's aligned with the international community and our obligations to everybody in the City of Swan. Councillor Scanlon mentioned the extraordinary economic opportunities for Western Australia of going in this direction. Councillors, we needn't be afraid that the sort of sky is going to fall in economically. Far from it, actually, it's going to lead to an economic boom going in this direction. Councillor Congleton mentioned that we don't want to buy dodgy Indian carbon credits. Well, that's the risk that can be recognised in the report.
I didn't say the word dodgy.
No, he didn't.
No, I did not say the word dodgy. Please remove that. I don't want it on the record about dodgy things. Thank you.
Absolutely right, Councillor. You did not say dodgy, but you said Indian carbon credits. Look, any carbon credits that we do purchase.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson. Sorry, point of order. Just because something's an Indian carbon credit is not a negative thing. It's the type of carbon credit that was raised.
Yeah, I'm sure their carbon credits are very good in India. We'll ensure that our carbon credits are AAA rated carbon credits from wherever we get them. Very good point. Councillor McNamara suggested that worries came from teachers and adults. Well, facts and learning comes when you're a child from adults. We learn everything from our teachers and from the world around us. So if something has become a concern to, I think it's Mr Porter, well, you know, he's probably got his facts from well-educated teachers who understand how to explain them to him. If we are ahead of the game because we have a lot of hybrid vehicles, well, that's a good thing. It means we can achieve the net zero CO2 target sooner. One final thing, councillors, I'd like to suggest to you is this. Imagine if you were still a teenager.
Councillor Johnson, that is your 3 minutes. Right reply, and because you interrupt, I actually let you go an extra 25 seconds.
All right, well, I've only got another sentence.
Well,
imagine if you're a teenager.
One sentence is one sentence, so make
which way would you vote?
Okay, those in favour? Councillor Catalano, Kiley, Johnson, Podovnik, Scanlon, Richardson, favour. The rest are against. The motion is lost. Okay, councillors, that's the last we have to deal with tonight. Notice the motion to be considered at the following meeting, if given during this meeting. Councillor Zanino, I believe you have one.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I'd like to move at the next meeting that the City of Swan CEO immediately contact the relevant state government departments and agencies and residential developers adjacent to Walcott Avenue and Murray Road, West Swan, in order to find an urgent and humane solution to save and relocate local wildlife, including kangaroos displaced by the loss of habitat. And two, the CEO authorise the immediate temporary closure of Walcott Avenue, West Swan, to ensure the safety of wildlife and the residential community until a satisfactory plan can be actioned to minimise the endangerment of kangaroos and native fauna, given that they are taking refuge on road verges to find food, resulting in their vehicular injury and death.
Thank you, Councillor Hanna. Any other notices for next meeting, councillors? Being none on that note, I'll call the meeting to adjourn. Thank you.
Confidential items, Mr Mayor.
Moved them in bulk at the start, councillor. Should have been paying attention.